Good morning.
I don't know if it's on.
It isn't on.
Sound like it.
No.
It sounded like it was at first.
But it sounds like it.
Can you all hear me? Is the microphone on? Okay, thank you. I couldn't tell. Good morning. I'm Laurie Bricker, and I am Chair of Participation and Success, and I want to welcome all of you here today. We have Lynn Bracewell Phillips, who is Vice Chair of the committee, Joe Hinton, a member of the committee, Elaine Mendoza is on her way, and we have Brenda Payovich, who is a member of the board and who is gracious enough to be here this morning, as if she's not on enough committees. Anyway, welcome all of you. I want to go over agenda item 1, which is a committee chair's overview. A few notes of interest. Governor Rick Perry has appointed 10 student regents to their respective university systems and 1 student representative to serve on the Higher Education Coordinating Board for terms to expire May 31st, 2010. And we would like to officially welcome Heather Morris of Lubbock to the Participation and Success Committee today, and she's also the new student board member for the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. Heather is a student at Texas Tech University. She is a member of the American Society for Public Administrators and National Council of University Research Administrators. She has received her bachelor's degree in English and is currently pursuing a master's degree in public administration from Texas Tech. We welcome you, and we're so glad you're here. If you all remember, Trey Lewis, who is our first student board member from the University of Houston, who was from Harlingen, did a spectacular job and kind of paved the way for student board members. So we're really excited to have Heather here, and we look forward to working with her. Since our last committee meeting, there are some important events that have taken place through P16 Initiatives Division of the Coordinating Board. Dr. Raymond Paredes, Commissioner of Higher Education, hosted a meeting on June 15th and 16th for approximately 40 superintendents of districts across the state with TEA officials and legislative representatives to begin the dialogue around the college and career readiness standards and our efforts at working together in terms of our major initiatives, especially closing the gaps. I attended that meeting, and as an old school board member, I was thrilled to see the response and interest and commitment of all of the superintendents and everyone in attendance. I've always said how important it is from the higher ed perspective that we reach out and work with our K-12 and P-12 partners often, and our commissioner and staff have done a spectacular job of doing that. So it was very, very successful. There were quite a few items that were pointed out, some of them that we talk about all the time, and some new. And I believe that, Mary, you put that on the website, the different presentations that were made. And one of which was made by Dr. Bruce Leslie, Chancellor of Alamo College, talking about the Pathways project of tracking student data, and everyone's interest was piqued over that, and everyone was very, very interested in taking that to scale. I believe that Houston is already working on it, the San Jac and Houston community colleges. So anyway, a lot of wonderful things were discussed, and I believe that everything, all the presentations are on our website if you want to look at it yourself. A P16 Institute was held on June 9th here in Austin. Approximately 220 participants from 35 regional P16 councils, college access challenge grant programs, and House Bill 400 schools were in attendance. For those of you that may not know, House Bill 400 schools are those that are identified as high schools that are sending less than 10% of their students to college. We've looked at those for a number of years, and through the efforts of this agency working hand in hand with TEA, we've made tremendous strides. Also this year, additional meetings were hosted during the Institute in order to help P16 councils develop strategic plans, learn how to access data related to their regional schools, and analyze the data for program improvements by working in partnership with the local institutes of higher ed, community college, and school district personnel. Throughout this past year, approximately 750 people participated in all 4 P16 institutes held. It is not known at this time if P16 institutes will be planned for the coming year, but if one word could be used to summarize the past year's efforts, it would probably be successful. That's what it says in my script. What I think the one word would be was stupendous. From all of the P16 councils that I have interfaced with, they have said that the support that Dr. Laredo and her staff have given to them in encouraging them, supporting them, and giving them a push when needed has really been spectacular. So thank you to Dr. Laredo and your staff. During the week of June 15th, the outreach unit of the P16 Initiatives Division made presentations at the Texas Association of School Boards state meeting addressing college and career readiness efforts of the coordinating board. On May 18th, an adult basic education symposium was sponsored by the coordinating board. This meeting was well attended, and the dialogue resulted between stakeholders from the field concerning the efforts that need to be in place in order to strengthen the transition of adult education students into post-secondary programs. Planned for this week, on June 25th, a meeting will be held here at the Coordinating Board for Deans of Colleges of Education to review current Coordinating Board teacher preparation policies in light of the proposed rule changes for degree approvals. In addition, I wanted to remind everyone that the Star Award ceremony will be held in the fall in Dallas.
Yes, ma'am.
In Dallas. And when is the deadline, Mary?
15th of June for nominations, and then August the 15th for applications.
The 15th of June for nominations and August the 15th for applications for the Star Award. Also, the 3rd annual State of Higher Education will take place during that meeting. A couple of other things. I get the emails from a lot of the P16s across the state, and the one in Midland, Odessa, the one in South Texas, certainly the one in Austin. They're doing some wonderful things. In addition, the P16 and the Greater Houston P16 received a grant, I think it was last year, from the Simmons Foundation for a We Go, W-E-E, like Early Childhood Go Center, and it's being held at the YMCA in the Texas Medical Center, and it's a multi-year grant. And I'm going to pass around pictures of their first graduation ceremony of these children. I have to say that plagiarism is alive and well in Houston. We lifted the idea from, I believe it was Isleta ISD. We saw pictures several years ago of their preschool kids graduating, and they were wearing the cap and gown and hood of the different colleges that they were going to attend. We're talking about 4- and 5-year-olds. So the Houston WeGo Center used that idea, and it's really a very successful program, and I congratulate the Houston P16. In addition, the West Houston P16, under the chairmanship of Mary Landrum, who is on the Spring Branch ISD board, just held a math summit at the University of Houston, and I've heard that it was incredibly successful. So our P16s are doing really, really well, and again, thanks to Dr. Laredo and her staff, because they are really providing the kind of support they need. That concludes my committee chair overview.
Mrs. Bricker, if I could take
sure.
the privilege of recognizing the director of that unit that has overseen all of these 4 summits that we've had, and that's Priscilla Martinez. She's in the back.
Will you
She's
please?
coordinated
There you
all
go.
of them.
Thank you very much, Priscilla. You've done a spectacular job.
She was with the P16 work in the Valley when she came to us.
Right. Thank you so much. Okay. Agenda item 2 is consideration of adopting the minutes from the March 23rd, 2009 Participation and Success Committee meeting. May I have a motion to adopt the minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Joe Hinton. Second by Lynn Phillips. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 3 is the consideration of adopting the consent calendar. Please note that agenda item 11 has been removed from the consent calendar and will be considered by the committee later in the meeting. May I have a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
So moved.
Moved by Lynn Phillips,
Second.
second by Joe Hinton. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 4 is consideration of adopting the staff recommendation relating to the statewide developmental education plan. Tamara Clunas, Director of Developmental Education, Division of P16 Initiatives, will present this item.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am going to share with you the Ms. Bricker.
Hold the microphone a little bit closer to you.
Oh, sure. Is that better?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Ms. Bricker, I'm going to present the proposed state plan for the biennium that you have in your packet. We'll also be referring to 3, I guess you want to say, images or graphics to help further provide clarity to my comments. One is the bullseye presentation. They all have the same heading, but one has a triangle, one is just a circular drawing with the bullseye, and the other is a system flow. So it would, if you have those 3, I'll be referring to them as we're going along.
Does everybody have these?
It would be
Not
this
that one, it's this one. It's the one right on top.
This one.
It'll be this one here with the circle, the system flow.
This one here.
This says agenda item 4.
It's the circles.
Oh, no, it's 9. I'm sorry. Okay. Got it.
All right. I'll just refer to those, as clarity, and if you have questions.
Okay.
As you're aware, the coordinating board submitted a request for the 81st legislative session to have $30 million trustee to the coordinating board to invest in improving our DevEd system. The session outcome was that we received $5 million, and this plan is going to be undergirded by that $5 million, an additional $1.1 million that we have for FY09, and then $3 million from our FY 2010 appropriations. So I'm going to be talking about different activities and strategies, but those are the resources that are going to undergird this plan. I want to give you some background on the goals that we have in trying to dramatically improve our system. We have pockets of success, yes, but we've been taking a fragmented approach in funding smaller projects. We want to bring it all together. And we have 6 goals that we're going to use that are going to drive our efforts for the biennium. We want to address innovation. We want to ensure and put in our plan that we're going to investigate the effectiveness and scalability of many of the strategies that are emerging in the research literature of innovative practices that address acceleration of students in developmental education and improving their student outcomes. So that's one of our core primary goals. And I'll elaborate on that, what I mean by innovation, in just 1 minute. We want to improve the availability and scope of academic advising and counseling, the preparedness of our faculty, because even after we put the best innovative strategies that are research-driven and evidence-based into play, the ultimate reality is that it's the preparedness of the faculty to execute that instruction that's going to lead to student success. We also want to look at program excellence, which builds on the coordinating board strategic plan for community colleges, trying to encourage our programs to pursue national recognition and certification in their respective areas. We also need to look at our assessment instruments. Our assessment and placement is very critical. It's the foundation where we are as far as trying to move forward and to evaluate effectiveness. So we need to look at assessment and placement. We also have a statutory requirement to align adult basic education with post-secondary, and that often intersects with developmental education. So we've integrated that piece into our proposed plan. So those are the core areas that we're going to look at. I want to take you back to innovation. If you look at this particular handout here, I want to explain the strategies that you're going to hear about from the coordinating board for the next biennium are going to focus on this issue. Largely, for the most part, instruction, developmental education in this state has been course-based. Okay, we're looking at innovation is taking the best of course-based, that's evidence-based, and taking the best of non-course-based. And in the middle, if you see that combined methods, that's where innovation lies. Innovation lies right there in taking the best of those two worlds, and we want to use our resources to try to fund and find out investigate the effectiveness and the scalability of this piece of these combined methods of course-based and non-course-based. There's a lot emerging in the literature about that, and when we talk about innovation, when you see that word, it's a generic term, sometimes overused, but the definition for the coordinating board stance as far as developmental education is concerned is combined methods, the best of both. So we're not getting rid of course-based in the traditional delivery at all, but we're looking at trying to take the best of both of those pieces with an emphasis on acceleration. During the legislative session, that was where the interest in legislation was, with accelerating students through and improving effectiveness, and we want to make sure that we continue that. I want to also talk about academic advising and counseling. We want to make sure that our DevEd students are not dropped off after the first semester. We want to make sure that we have academic advising and counseling that's taking place throughout their experience in their institution. And so when we're looking at the strategies that I'm going to be talking about here in a moment, we're talking about trying to make sure that we are looking at making sure that our DevEd students have a continuity, there's a continuous flow of a support and counseling and advising, a system in place to help them throughout their matriculation. The other area is going to be, as I said, the single assessment instrument. We want to look at that through our strategies. If we're going to evaluate effectiveness, we need to have something that gives us a single marker, and we are waiting to find out if the alignment study that's currently going on in college readiness, that's as far as we've gotten. We can't move forward until we find out the state of our current assessments, how well each of them are aligned with the college and career readiness standards, and then next steps will be taken and recommendations made to the executive officers as far as that's concerned. Underpreparedness of faculty, as I said earlier, one of our core goals. We want to make sure that we have faculty that are fully trained in implementing these innovative strategies. Many of the innovative strategies, Ms. Bricker, that are emerging as effective have only come out in the last 5 to 10 years, and many faculty members are not adequately trained to integrate and use these innovative strategies in the classroom. And so we want to provide faculty with that support through our strategies. So I'm going to move on to page 5 of the plan copy that you received and talk about the 2 core strategies that we have that we're putting forth for the biennium. You've heard Dr. Paredes speak numerous times in the last several board meetings about comprehensive demonstration projects, and that is a core flagship strategy that we have for the biennium, and that is going to involve us funding a handful of large-scale projects. They're not pilot projects, they're large-scale projects that are well-funded, that will provide institutions with the resources that they need to help us to investigate the effectiveness of these strategies, because we're looking at scalability for statewide implementation in various components. So that's what that's for, and we're going to use the appropriations that we received from the legislature to fund those projects. Now, we're not just funding, individual components. We want to basically investigate the effectiveness of our model, which is the flow chart that you have, this one right here. We want to make sure that our students that enter Texas institutions enter into a system that has been evaluated and is evidence-based, and it involves taking students through, as I said, this assessment, that they're properly placed. Placement is critical to the first steps, and if that is not in line, the students are being set up for failure and lack of success and dropping out. So we want to make sure that that's one key area of this demonstration project and this model that we want to investigate. And then we, as I said, the innovative instructional strategies that differentiate instruction. We want to make sure that we are not continuing to use this one-size-fits-all model of a syllabus that's been created before students come into the classroom that doesn't adequately reflect the needs of the students. So that instructional, that differentiated instruction is really critical, and faculty development to differentiate instruction is something that's sorely needed, and our demonstration projects will help us to evaluate that piece. And then, as I said before, the student support service system that goes throughout the entire time that the students are in the system, and then the feedback loop is very, very important. We want to make sure that our programs have the capacity to effectively evaluate their programs, to use that continuous feedback loop to make changes, that if something's not working, we change it, we put something else into place. And so that just gives you a snapshot of the comprehensive projects we want to fund with the money we were appropriated from the legislature this session. The other strategy is to, on page 8 of the plan, is to fund a community college developmental education initiative that would put one of our leading institutions to fund projects with institutions around the state. And so that's another one of our plans, strategies, and that will be funded with FY09 resources. And then the last strategy is this catch-all strategy of model developmental education and adult education projects. We have the money from the legislature for 2010. We have appropriations from FY09, and then we have a $10 million appropriations for adult basic education. And these other strategies that you're going to hear about from Dr. Laredo here shortly they're going to fall under this particular strategy. So that's the plan in a nutshell. I could go on, but I know we don't have all day. So I just want to, I'm here to answer any questions that you have about any of the components, any of the goals, and so I'm here to answer questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tamara. I want to welcome Ms. Mendoza. Seems like there was a whole lot of traffic between San Antonio and Austin.
She's been in Dallas by now, it's really.
She went by way of Dallas. I've done something like that before. Are there questions? Because I have some too, but I'll save mine. Questions? Anyone?
I have an overall question.
Okay.
If this is part of our last 5 years of closing the gaps, what is the timeline on which, when do you expect to see results, and what results do you expect to see if this is part of the Closing the Gaps plan?
Well, that's a good question. We, depending on the outcome of approval, we will be ready to move forward to release the request for proposals right away, with the goal of having these projects funded and ready to go before the end of the year, because we would like these projects to begin to implement their programs for the spring of 2010, the summer and the fall of 2010, so that we can begin to evaluate right away, because we recognize that the way that the legislature is funded, we don't have much time to get ready for the next session. So my goal is to have these projects, of course, with leading by the executive officers, that these projects will be up and running and fully funded no later than the start of the year, so these programs can be implemented and put into place in January. And what we're hoping is that even if we only have 2 long semesters and a summer session, that we can begin to see if these practices can move students through quickly. Acceleration is key. If these innovative strategies, those combined methods that I was telling you about, actually can move a student through DevEd faster, and then as well as improving student outcomes. Because if a student makes a C in developmental education, they finish the college readiness, but are they fully prepared? The higher the grade is, the better the student performs in the classroom, is the greater the strength of their college readiness. So we not only want to keep students into the classroom and have them to be retained, we want them to perform at the highest level possible of student outcomes, so that they have the greatest chance of success when they get into their courses. So those are 3 core areas.
Have you looked at the numbers at all to say if if we're able, it looks to me like this can't possibly have any effect at all on our closing the gap goal by 2015. That has nothing to do with whether it's a wonderful program or not. I just want us to be sure what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Well, it can have an impact in a couple of ways. One is the fact that we lose students who don't succeed in developmental education. They get caught in that loop.
I mean, we know all that, and philosophically, I'm totally with you. But my question is only related to whether or not this is really a strategy for closing the gaps, or just something that we very much need to do.
Well, here's the thing: if we are successful in keeping students in and getting them out of developmental education and getting them into college-ready courses, then they can move on into completion of actually getting the credentials that actually count towards our closing the gaps goals. We lose many of our minority students because they never get out of developmental education.
That's my point. I understand that. That's my point.
Right.
My point is that between now and 2015, given when you implement this program, I don't know that we're going to capture any numbers from it.
Let me try to answer.
Sure.
I think your sense is correct in terms of whether there will be a huge impact for 2015. I'm not sure that would be the case, because we're talking about a small number of demonstration projects which will hopefully influence the system over a longer period of time.
Right.
And so I think that's true. But one thing that one would have to look at, and this hasn't been fully fleshed out in terms of the accelerated learning, I think that's where we have the biggest chance for gain.
Right.
And right now we lose, unfortunately, the bulk of people who go into developmental ed. And if we can at least not lose those people who really would benefit from an acceleration, that will do two things right away. Number one, we forget that part of the participation is calculated by virtue of not just our success in getting more people into college, but our success in keeping them in, the persistence. And so if we need to calculate, and I think this comes into some of the decisions for the October board meeting in terms of the accelerated plan, as to what extent will practices demonstrated here help us
David, pull your microphone closer.
help us keep more students in beyond that first semester, beyond the second semester, beyond the third semester, because we lose thousands of people there. Now, is this immediately going to be a gangbuster that will blow the numbers out of the water? I suspect not immediately. I think it has a long-term potential to do it. I think one of the things that is important here that could have more effect than we might initially realize is the other risk factors. I mean, what are the things that are causing students to leave school that may need developmental ed but aren't directly related to that? That may help it, but we have to get more numbers. We'll have a better feel even after the first semester, I think, of this in terms of the real impact. But I think you can get some numbers calculated in terms of persistence.
I'd like to see some numbers. I mean, at some point, we have to say, oh, we only have 5 years left, so we better do something differently if we're going to close the gaps. And when we started talking about innovation and developmental ed, I mean, I can see that y'all have worked a lot on this, and I appreciate this report, and it's good, but this isn't what I was thinking about. To me, this is not very innovative. It's hopeful. But when I'm talking about innovation, I mean, let's take responsibility. Whose fault is it that we have so many people in developmental ed? It's the fault of the state of Texas. It's the fault of our school systems. I think this high schools ought to pay. I don't think these students ought to have to pay to take developmental ed. And I think we as a coordinating board ought to get involved in this and not just keep doing the same thing, like, oh, gee, these kids didn't get prepared. Let's put them in some courses. I urge y'all to think more outside the box.
Well, actually, if I could add to that, at the conference last Sunday and Monday, that was kind of a recurring theme of developmental ed, and the frustration on the part of the high school superintendents and the hope, I guess, on the part of the community college representative. The dialogue is happening, and I believe that when you talked about bringing things to scale, that's where the hope's going to really become reality, in my opinion. Projects like College Connections, projects like these summer institutes, where we bring it to scale and where it's maybe affecting 50 kids here and 50 kids there, and then all of a sudden it may be affecting a couple thousand. That's where I think that we're going to make a big difference. And the indicators that you've talked about, I think, are the critical ones. In particular, looking at a single assessment, I think that's what I've heard the community colleges talk about over and over and over again. And Ms. Mendoza, right before you came, I was mentioning about the workshop that was held last week, and Bruce Leslie presented about the pathways and how he's tracking these students. And now Houston and San Jac are going to pick it up, and pretty soon 2 or 3 or 4 more are going to pick that up. El Paso. To me, the academic advising, the accelerated curriculum, those are the kinds of things that are going to bring it to scale. And that I see your frustration and I understand it, and I agree with you, but I think that the bringing it to scale is going to be key, where we're not talking about 1, 2, or 3 students. However, that 1, 2, and 3, and 4, those are the students that are important. Another question was, and with more courage than wisdom, I'm going to try and figure out what was said here. Rob Eisler, Chair Eisler, was there as well. And it seems like the superintendents felt like perhaps House Bill 3 will allow developmental ed to be pushed into the high school where it wasn't before. And that's, I guess, between now and January, you'll know that, whether or not you can do that, and that'll be part of the plan. And that will put the burden, well, the responsibility on the high schools. The dialogue that's continuing, I think, between the two entities is the most critical. And I'll yield for more comments.
Let me share one thing. I don't know if this was clear. What Tamara has here on this first page is really the model for the demonstration projects alone. I think there are a number of other things that have to go on. There's going to be efforts to address accelerated learning at other schools as well. I mean, this has been one of the commissioner's primary elements that he's been concerned with. There is this discussion with the schools in terms of identifying what's needed in terms of developmental ed while still in high school. And we just, several of us just attended a Lumina Foundation meeting for a grant we have, and they were talking about using the senior year more systematically to bring students up to speed in terms of where they're falling short. One of the things I think was a bit concerning with the meeting with the superintendents was they kept talking about the need for college readiness standards. And so that you know, for them that means a test score. Mm-hmm. And they didn't make one reference to the college and career readiness standards that have been adopted by this board and by you know, the Commissioner of Education. And so I think part of what has to happen is to tie together those elements together in a way that the superintendents will recognize that they were talking about college readiness standards because of Representative Eisler's bill, which really was referring to test scores. And so there are a number of things that really have to be worked out. And I think you're right, Dr. Phillips. I mean, some of these things aren't going to make a huge change. What's here, I do think one of the things that isn't evident is that from what staff has found out and what we've learned from our conference in the fall was that very few schools really bring together all these elements. One thing that's become evident to us is that adult basic ed students have been embedded in with our developmental ed students, and breaking them out and addressing their specific needs can be very, very important. That we need to identify, individual students in the process, because we have too many students who are just caught in a bottleneck, who keep making an almost ready score on the college readiness test, and should probably be moving on. That there's something else involved, and there are things that like that have to be addressed. The fact that we haven't had a single test, I mean, Tamara found from the professionals actually running developmental ed that while community colleges had wanted to have multiple tests for the people in the field, that's become problematic. in terms of really trying to evaluate the progress of their students. So this first page is really related specifically to the demonstration projects, which will inform everyone, and that's that $5 million that came to the board in a rider, which is actually $2.5 million a year. And then there's a greater picture of developmental ed, and I think, Dr. Phillips, that one thing we haven't identified clearly at this point is the jump start element for this, which I think that's really what your plan to fall is about, is what are the key strategic initiatives that will make the biggest difference in the shortest period of time, right?
Yeah.
And that, and you're correct, this is not that.
I think there are two problems with this. One is that there's nothing that tells me this is the best way to spend the money. I can't tell that. And I recognize we have to spend the money since we got it. But and the other is it's just triage. I mean, until responsibility is placed where it belongs for these students coming out of high school, it's going to be triage.
Is there a way between, say, now and the next 6 weeks or whatever, that you all would have the kind of dialogue with the community college, not necessarily the presidents or chancellors, but whoever is on the ground, more like their P16 specialists or their whatever, because I think that will validate what you're already saying y'all are going to do. It sounds like exactly what they tell me and all of us.
If I could respond?
Sure.
Since I started with the coordinating board in November, I've been doing that environmental scan. I brought in the key developmental education associations into the coordinating board in December. We brought in 25 institutions to the coordinating board in January to talk about these specific issues. I participated in another meeting in April with 25 institutions in the North Texas area, vetting these particular issues and talking about these core components, holding many focus groups and really trying to vet that, and then again on last Friday in Dallas again. So I can continue that, and I will, and if you'd like, I can give you a summary brief in writing that I can get to Dr. Laredo, capturing where we've been around the state. I've done 3 site visits. I went to Amarillo College, Amarillo Community College. I went to El Paso, spent a couple of days there looking at their program, so I can continue that environmental scan, looking at the field and vetting this, because what you see captures the last 6 months of work.
If I might add, did you mention the Community College Association grant from Lumina or Gates and Jobs for the Future?
Yes, we met with them about this. We're going to be working with the Texas Association of Community Colleges with the Gates and Developmental Education Initiative, and these components are all in line with their recommendations and what we've gotten from the field. But again, there's still regions of the state that I haven't been to, but the 200 plus members, I had a town hall in November with all of the key stakeholders of institutions for the Texas Association of Developmental Education, the Texas College Reading and Learning Association. I had those meetings in late 2008 and in January of 2009. So, but I can continue that and capture any types of questions that you might want me to ask them.
You skipped over the work with the Community College Association very briefly. There is a grant that they received that specifically Gates wanted the coordinating board involved. The Community College Association had requested it separately. There's a data element which our staff is heading up. Tamara will be meeting with the person designated from that project monthly. There's a meeting with people across the country on developmental ed on July 21st. This month, there will be several community colleges from Texas that will receive large grants from Gates specifically to work on developmental ed. That hasn't been made public. We don't know exactly what those are. We have to take into account, but I think there may be as many as 4 community colleges receiving those grants. There's a great deal of effort going on that's coming from out of state into Texas and vice versa, and it will be helpful for us to know what those grants are going to be for. I'm not sure how much money it is. I'm suspecting $4 or $5 million from that outside source. Plus, I think Gates has expressed some interest in the board applying for a grant for the whole state of Texas following this meeting. Is it this week? Or is it next week?
The Texas Association of Community Colleges?
No, this is
grant?
Gates has a
Gates.
meeting.
Because the community college has their conference, I think, this week. The association.
No, next week.
Is it next week?
Let's see. No, actually, it's the first week in July. I think it's July 8th through the Wednesday through the end of the week.
Could you give us a list of the top community colleges' developmental ed programs and what the percentage of success rate is on the next report we have?
Yes.
I mean, I don't really need myself the kind of report you were talking about with all your meetings. I just like to know which ones are successful and what's their success rate.
We've already put into play with our planning and accountability. So, Dr. Gardner, we can work on that.
Yeah, in fact, in the community college accountability system, there's a whole section on developmental ed by school, which shows their success over a number of years or lack thereof, and staff can pull that together for you very quickly.
Yeah, and I would be sure and put that into anything you're going to use as a model. Let us know that it's worth it. If their success rate, we have no way of knowing from what you've presented today whether the models have a 10% success rate or a 90% success rate, and that would make a lot of difference in spending dollars.
Well, what we've done with the particular model that you have is that we've taken and gotten the best of the evidence in these particular components, and the demonstration projects would help us to basically determine if each of these components fit together in a system. But I agree, we'll get you whatever data you would like as far as the effectiveness of our institutions.
That'd be great.
Other questions? Yes, Ms. Pavich.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm struggling with, too. We're asking to spend $9.1 million. How do we measure success? I mean, what are we anticipating? What are we going to benchmark this against when it's all said and done?
That's the right question.
Anybody?
The baseline measure is going to be your current effectiveness of moving students through the system. One, from the standpoint of how quickly they go through, how much they persist at those levels. Effectiveness is going to be, are you moving students through faster? With some of the models we saw at El Paso, Amarillo, just incredible numbers of how quickly they can move students through. Can we determine that as effective and scale that across the state? That's what we really want to see. We want students we know that while we're working in our college readiness unit to address those systemic issues that put students into developmental education, we're also looking at what happens to them when they get there. So it's kind of a two-pronged thing going on.
Are we setting goals, or are we setting expectations, in terms of the numbers of students that are now going to participate more and be more successful?
Well, I don't have the data on the number of students. We have the information on average for the data that's on our highereddata.org website of how many students are entering our institutions. And if you look at from 2005 until now, there's been a steady decrease across all of our institutions into the number of students that are going into developmental education around the state. And I do have a spreadsheet, Ms. Bricker, that I can provide a copy to the committee that we have prepared. What we want to do is to continue to decrease, improve the student outcomes, that they actually get through the classes and move on. Now, as far as what's going to happen to the ones of actually getting into the system in the first place, if this line represents the threshold of high school to developmental education, that's a part of our overall systemic P16 strategy. And so part of our work is looking at that, but the other part is when they get to developmental education, what type of system is there to receive them, and will they be effective in getting in and out as fast as possible and then moving on.
So I guess if the 50 community college systems working along with the 35 universities and the however many 1,100 high schools or school districts, if those school districts are working with the community colleges and four-year, and if you all identify the numbers of students who more than likely will have to go into developmental ed, and then you look at those students and see, like in 1 year or less, depending on the numbers of subjects that they have to take, accelerated or differentiated, and those students are successful, get out of developmental ed, that's one measure, and then move forward that next year into regular college courses, that's another measure of success. You know, I think about Lynette Heckman and I went to a conference 2 summers ago, and every time we talk about something like this, I'm reminded about the importance of, you know, we put way too much emphasis on participation and not nearly as much on success. And every time we have these kinds of discussions, I think about that. And this sounds like that's the direction that you're focusing on. You can get these kids into college easier than not, because whether it's open enrollment, whether it's community college or whatever, it's making sure they're successful to move on and be successful throughout college. Another small idea that I don't know if this came up in all of your discussions, but are you familiar, or y'all familiar with Section 504? It's like other health impaired. It's like a way to do. It's like special education is special education, but it's other impairments or other disabilities or whatever. And it's called 504. And what is involved in that is if a student is designated 504, then they have to have certain kinds of support. They have to meet with the instructor, you know, once every 6 weeks. What a concept, you know. You know, they have to take tests with certain kind of monitors or whatever it is that they need. I'm wondering if either we could designate students that are in developmental ed something like a 504 or a 504, but it sounds like what we want to do is maybe not openly segregate these kids, but in some way disaggregate so that we can watch them and nurture and mentor them along. Anyway, look at it and just see if something pops up that, you know, because it sounds a lot like what you're talking about. The what did you call it? I thought I wrote it down. But basically the faculty working with them and having somebody assigned to them that's like counseling and that sort of thing.
Well,
We can do that.
One of the presidents at San Jacinto Community College had noted that in another state, and this isn't developmental ed per se, but in terms of persistence, that they use work-study money to pay students to periodically call students to see how they were doing. It sounds like a strange thing, but they actually followed up on problems they were having, and persistence went up dramatically.
Oh, absolutely.
But to give you some examples of, for the fall 2004 cohort of those students requiring developmental education in math, there were 32,000 of those, and only 17,000 returned the following fall. So in reading, it was 19,000 required developmental ed, and only 11,000 returned in the following fall. So the biggest gap in the percent returning is really for math. So that tells us one thing. But we have hard data in terms of how many students are returning. What this doesn't tell us is one of the most important elements is how many are very close to being college ready, and what percentage of those are we losing, because that's the group. And we really have 3 clear-cut groups of students. We have those that are very close to being college ready, those students that we've always thought we were talking about, and students that really aren't even close to being college ready. I mean, they're really or trying to be 8th grade ready, that have been mingled in with these numbers. And one thing that is significantly different here that isn't apparent because it seems so logical is that all those students have been lumped together and haven't been addressed in a significantly different kind of way. But there are hard numbers, and I think we do have to have specific measures for what we expect to see. I think those that we have in the accountability system are a beginning point, but I don't think there's been the kind of analysis to say how much should we expect the gang to be, which I think really ties in Ms. Pajovich's and Dr. Phillips' both of the concerns together, and that can be done. And I think,
Are we still saying that between 40 and 50% of students need developmental ed, or is it more than that, or do we know?
The ones who graduate from high school?
The ones that graduate from high school.
I think the last I saw, we were still saying that is still about the same.
Because again, the rigor of the senior year, I mean, that's where we can really push the responsibility, the shared responsibility onto the K-12 side with the kind of dialogue that we're having now. Before, I think it would be unfair. But now I think it would be something that would be a partnership, because their success would definitely affect higher ed success.
Well, and if I could respond really quickly, because is that during the 81st legislative session, Senate Bill 1567 actually did just that, but the bill did not survive. That actually put it was a pilot to put, models of DevEd into the high schools. So the projects that we propose that we're going to move forward with, our demonstration projects, are actually going to require that type of engagement with the K through 12 system. So that's going to be a requirement of any projects that we fund. So we will be crossing over into that arena, but it's also looking at students systemically who are placed in DevEd, and then one piece of it will be that engagement with K through 12.
I think, too, the other issue to add is with the college readiness standards, the assignments that are being prepared are also the way to connect that secondary education arena, engaging with students that are already showing the possibility of not being college ready. So by the time they get them out to that senior year, then they can have worked with them individually or as a cohort to make sure that they are college ready when they graduate. And I think the key element to say is that we're looking at a total systemic change, and systems don't change overnight. But I think that we will find from these efforts, and tied into each of these projects, is deep evaluation connected to goals so that we can achieve numbers and have success with students that are finding themselves in this lot. So whatever is approved to go out, the institution who accepts the award is going to have to meet that standard of performance at the end. But you're looking at a lot of players, so it's a very intricate part to make it something that you ultimately will want to work across the state and scalable. And I can honestly say that Tamara has spent hours in her, aside from her own research, because this is her area of expertise. Her doctoral dissertation is in this area.
Wow.
So she's been across the state, she has met with people, she definitely knows what's there and what's not there. To move this gap quickly, I wish we could tell you that in 7 years, yes, it's gone. But we are working in that direction so that it is gone and students have a fair play coming in.
Ms. Bricker, I'd like to say that one thing that I think that we could look for in 7 years is that if we can come up with a system that takes students that are appropriate for acceleration and get them out of the way, it's, so to speak, not in a bad way, but if we can get those students out of the mix. Because you have students, as we said before, who barely missed the cutoff, but we have students that are coming onto our community college campuses who are at 5th grade functional literacy. I taught them. It's very difficult. And then you have the students who are just right on the cusp and they're frustrated because they're in some of the same situations. So if we can take that student who barely missed it and work on the margins in that senior year and get them to where they can bypass, and then have the very best system available to take those students who have the courage and want to try to go into post-secondary and get them ready, that will take a longer period of time. I think these demonstration projects are going to accomplish that, because we have to have a system that can take the student that is woefully behind but has the courage and want to try to become college ready to meet their needs. And if we can take that student that was almost there and can accelerate them to bypass that, I think that we will move forward in a measurable way many years from now.
The other thing, too, on the assessment, I just attended a meeting in April with 4 other states who only have one assessment instrument going into in that placement, and that is a difference for us because there are certain, you have a choice.
That's what I've heard from the community colleges, that they're real frustrated with that they don't know which one works and which one doesn't work. And I think with moving into end of course exams, that will kind of crystallize on the K-12 side, and then whatever we can do on the assessments of college readiness on our side will hopefully make things a little bit more aligned and clearer. Are there any other questions or comments? Ms. Pavovich?
I have a question about the money side. We're been appropriated the $5 million specifically for this strategy, and then we're taking the 4.1 out of the College Readiness Initiative strategy. The fiscal year 09, that 1.1 million, was that money that in the past had already been board approved or this committee approved for a different purpose, and now we're changing that purpose to this strategy?
No,
I thought that money was already.
That money was always in that amount, but it has not been previously board approved.
Okay.
We have not come with that project, but it was there in our budget when we divvied out the money and looking at the projects that would give us the best bang
I just
for the
didn't know
money
if we were
spent.
foregoing something
No.
that had already been approved.
No.
And then the $3 million for fiscal year 2010, what is the total budget right now for the next biennium for College Readiness Initiative?
Well, we were waiting to see what the governor was going to veto or not, so I can't give you a final figure today, but I could certainly give it to you in a couple of days.
What does it look like today?
Lynette, do you remember what we saw 13 for the two bienniums?
It's about 22.5 million.
22.5.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then I guess we'll see it today when we get into the internet and see if anything else was taken out. Then we'll have a firm idea.
That does not include the extra from
AB.
the 10 million for
Adult basic ed.
Adult basic ed.
and the 5 million for developmental ed. That's simply the college readiness strategy.
Is the 22?
Yes.
So we're taking the 3 out of the 22. Okay. And my last question is, how did we, I'm just curious how you come up to the budgeted amount of 9.1 million. You can just give me a quick rundown on how you get to that point.
You want to just give us a synopsis of the projects so that
Right. The $5 million is for the demonstration projects. The 1.1 is for one of the other strategies. The $3 million has been set aside at this point, but the full scope of the projects have not been vetted by executive leadership or the board.
Right.
But we do have a lot. What we're focusing on right now is trying to do some ABE transition work. Our GED students, we have 60,000 students who pass a GED every year, and we get less than 30% of them into our institutions. So one of our strategies is to try to work with the ABE providers around the state to help to put the best practices in place to get those recent GED graduates into post-secondary transition. And that's one piece. We have less than $1 million allocated towards that. So we haven't finalize the projects because we really want to be evidence-based and data-driven and trying to use the best practices that are emerging before we finalize those strategies to bring to the board for approval. Thank you. You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments?
Is the 1.1 already approved, or does it have to be approved
it
today?
has to be approved today.
Is that the only amount that has to be approved before August 31st?
Yes, everything else. Well, there's an acceleration course models, particularly focusing on math, as Dr. Gardner was saying, but that's $225,000. That's 09 money.
Where is that?
That's in your packet.
That's in the 1.1, or it's additional?
That's
It's additional.
It's in your packet on
It's
your
in your
strategies
packet.
that we've listed out that we sent.
But it's not part of this motion, or it
No.
is?
No, it's not.
It's
a
not.
separate.
Okay.
Okay, any more questions?
I have a question,
Yes.
a statement, the same one I've had for the last 3 years. Are we or are we not going to close the gaps and make our assignment that's been given to us? And how do we measure that? It's to me, from just a purely business standpoint, first meeting that I sat in and listened to this, it was like somebody asked me what time it was, and then the discussion started about how to build a sundial, and it just goes on and on and on. But the real bottom line is, are we going to make it or are we not?
Well,
And if we are not, we better be sending up some red flags, because if we don't make it, then I won't be around at that time. But if I was, we'd have a post-audit of the whole process. And
He
take
means
that
he's not going to
thing-
be on the board. He didn't mean he wasn't going to be around.
Well, that's right. And if I keep this up, I may not, sooner than later. But you see where I'm going on this thing. But that's just the pure business way of approaching the thing, it seems to me, and it's simple. Are we or aren't we?
In my opinion, and I'll let staff answer as well, but in my opinion, the answer is yes. And here's why. What I've watched over the last 5 years, in spite of a hurricane wiping out a bunch of universities and high schools, more than one hurricane, in spite of the economy, in spite of tuition deregulation and tuition rising, in spite of not enough money for student financial aid, which is probably the key, I have seen this agency and the colleges and universities in partnership with the K-12 for the first time ever the last 5 years. I've seen them not only in meaningful dialogue, but in also working together, whether defining what it is colleges expect from high schools. That conversation, in my recollection, didn't even take place 5 years ago. So I think that even though we're making small incremental steps, I think despite all what a former superintendent used to say, obstacles, in spite of the obstacles, we are making those incremental changes. Now, in spite of everything, I see optimism on the part of high schools who are graduating more and more students college ready, school districts that are actually embracing the college-bound or career culture, P16 councils who are getting to the meat of the issue and really toughing it out and fighting with one another in a good way to resolve some of the differences. One that took place between a four-year university and a community college just 6 months ago, where they turned and looked at me. I was just an innocent bystander, and they said, "Do you see that this is what we've been talking about?" It was over transfer issues. So whether with the dialogue or with our agency working together with TEA, which in my experience never happened before 5 or 6 years ago, I think we're going to get there.
So the bottom line is that you really feel
I'm optimistic, but because I see the change. For the first time, before 5 or 10 years ago, you couldn't even identify that one child in the 7th grade that was failing the math course that made an entire school district miss being recognized. We can drill down and find out who that child is, disaggregate as to whether, he's poor, he's minority, he's whatever, and make no excuses. That's just my observation, and I'll let the professionals answer.
Well, I just want to clarify that the board did set goals and targets, and at every quarterly meeting you hear something about one of those, and you'll hear at the July meeting, or if you're at the strategic planning meeting tomorrow, you'll hear our current progress and where we stand, and some analysis. Now we're going to do some additional analysis we have to do in preparation for October in terms of specific areas to jumpstart. But when we were in Denver at the Lumina meeting, it became clear that Texas has been beyond most other states in terms of, one, setting clear-cut goals, number two, having targets that are regularly being monitored. I guess 3 or 4 years ago now, the board actually sat down, reviewed the targets, and modified some.
Correct.
It's been a very active monitoring.
Well, we might ought to do that again.
We are.
We're about to do that.
Yeah, we are.
And get it down to numbers that people can understand.
Well, it is down to numbers.
Maybe I should chime in as the assistant commissioner of this unit so that you might better understand how we operate and how we make decisions about projects that we're working on. I have an incredible staff that is fighting working under very tight conditions because of the fact that we know that 2015 is around the corner.
Well, I'm not
no, but what I'm saying is
criticizing that at all. I
no.
understand that.
What I'm saying is,
a good job.
we look at the data. What we do and what we have done over this year is to look at the data to see where we are, where the holes are, not only in the entire state, but regionally. So as we look at a project, we evaluate it and we see what effects it's had. We also are targeting where we have the biggest gaps, which right now is the Latino population. So that as we do things, we're looking at where we have made gains, where we're not making gains. What could we do to move this faster? Where would we get the most for the effort that we're putting in? And what stakeholders have we not addressed that maybe we've got to really start looking at because they are affecting us not moving? So we're trying to do it strategically. And Susan Brown's staff and I have become very good friends. Sometimes they don't want to hear from me because I'm constantly saying, what number is this? Where are we? So as we look at a project, if there's something wrong, then we come back to the table. Evaluation is the key that tells me whether or not we need to keep going. I know where the numbers are. I know the areas where we're not reaching them, and that's what we're trying to work towards. I probably will not be here in 2015, but I sure want to read that 2015 that number was reached because, you know, they're part of this effort,
That's the bottom line.
and we're part of this effort.
Did you reach the number or not?
And I want someone to be
One
able
of
to
the
pay my
things-
Social Security, so you need a workforce in this state. And that's what I think is important. Every child has the right to be educated. That's why we've become very close partners with TEA, because this staff cannot do it alone. I've got to be at the table with them.
I don't argue that at all. I just want to know, are we going to make it or are we not?
Let's just say, as long
How
as
you
I'm
got
sitting
there,
here, we're
I don't
working to
really
get
care
there.
that much. Just did we do it?
We do have to kickstart some things. There's
Yeah.
no doubt that
Yeah.
we do to sort of get to the finish line. And I think that's part of what the board has wanted to do over the next 3 months, is identify some of the equivalents of the recommended high school program that was one of those strategic decisions that was made that has made a difference. It's one of the reasons why we see more students in developmental ed that are closer to being college ready than were, because everyone, even though there's maybe a C student, is closer to having the type of preparation they need. We've seen, while it's not a direct measure in closing the gaps, that at the universities we've had about an 11-point increase in six-year graduation rates. That translates into about 4,000 more graduates a year at a university if you go back to that cohort than we would have had that not been approved. So there are a number of things we look at. We know the gap in graduation rates between Anglos, Hispanics, African Americans has to be closed. That alone would do a tremendous amount in terms of both our participation and success goals. We know we have to improve that dramatically. In fact, it would be good if we could improve the Anglo graduation rate to that of Asian Americans. I mean, that's really where we need to go, so that there are those areas that we need to target. And I think where we sort of know where some of the issues are, but where the best efforts are, I think some people have mentioned. If you look at this long list of strategies and activities, now we're at the time where we need to make some decisions in terms of which are, doing the most for us, and begin to, say some of these things, while they're good, the dollars perhaps would be better used in another area where we get more production, more success with the students. And we don't have that answer yet.
And I think not having those kind of things in these reports is what makes it hard for a board member. We're probably not at the place yet, but we'll probably get to the place where we have a recommended developmental ed program, just like the recommended high school program, although hopefully we won't call it that. I'm in favor of calling it the Recommended Accelerated Program, or RAP, which I think the kids would like. But anyway, but what would make it easier for me on a report like this, if you had said that Amarillo Community College has this program and they graduate this many, and the elements that we're interested in it are that they assess their students more carefully, and we hope to copy that, and we hope to reach their goals statewide and bring it to, more specifics would make me feel like I had enough information to vote that we recommend to the board that we spend the money that way. Do you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Good.
Any other comments or questions? Keep up the great work. We appreciate it. Do I have a motion to adopt the staff recommendation relating to the statewide developmental ed plan?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Mendoza. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Joe Hinton. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
I'm not in favor.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye. Joe?
Joe voted in.
Oh, we're voting again?
Yeah, we're voting again because I wanted to make sure that we have a majority. 2 in
I
favor?
don't know enough about it to say no or yes.
Okay, what's your vote?
I abstain.
You made this motion, you seconded my motion.
I know it. But as I think about this thing, I'm voting on something that, let me digress for a second. You guys on the staff, and girls, work with this stuff every day. So you know it inside out. We come around here about twice a year to have meetings and talk about these things. And we talk about a lot of other things. And when we come back to this, I get confused as I can be about where we stood or where we stand and how we're going to get from point A to point B to achieve our goals. And that is the concern I have. And I think that's the weakness in maybe it's my understanding of what goes on. But I know you folks work hard. You do a lot of good things, but I don't understand a lot of the details. This young lady made a great presentation. I don't understand half of it.
Okay.
But that's my problem.
If I could maybe help you and clarify that. My background is education.
I know.
But when I sit at this table, I am not an educator. I'm a policymaker. And so it's okay that we collectively maybe aren't experts in all areas of this agency. That's what we have senior staff for, to present it to us. What we're doing is only adopting the staff recommendation for the plan, for the developmental ed plan.
So there's no money involved in this.
Well, there's the money that's involved that's been dedicated to developmental ed that she talked about, that Tamara talked about. 1.1 million is part of this motion, and it's specifically for developmental ed. So all we're doing is adopting the staff has made the recommendation to adopt, and we're accepting the staff's recommendation or not. Okay? So there's a motion on the floor. Elaine Mendoza made the motion, and Joe Hinton seconded the motion. So
I'm hidebound to agree, so I do.
I'm sorry?
I'm hidebound to agree.
No,
that I made that motion, and I will support it.
Okay, so we have 3 for, any against?
But yes,
Or abstaining?
I'm against it if it is for 9.1 million. You just said it was just for this.
The 1.1 is what I understood. Is that
It's just-
correct?
That other item is on the second part of the agenda.
Yes, this is for the 1.1 million.
This document is an outline of a proposed plan to use the 9.1 million. That's another going to be another.
But you're going to vote on, you will be able to vote on the projects that are.
The actual projects are separate.
Yes,
The
ma'am.
last page, page 8, in the plan,
Yeah.
to me, it outlined that the 1.1 million is going to El Paso Community
That's right.
College
Right.
to do the demonstration projects, and then each of them will be competitively awarded
Yes.
after that.
Yes.
The other has not been specified, so we're not sort of committing those funds directly because they have not been specified.
Right, and the board
is
has not approved it. But the $5 million for the comprehensive projects, that's outlined in statute.
That's
We
given
have
to us
to do
by
that.
the
Well,
legislature.
I know that, but we have some discretion on what programs we use it on.
Oh, absolutely, and those will be fully vetted by you before anything
Well,
happens.
let's rewrite this motion then, because I don't see how anybody could figure out that these things that are all
We
on
have a motion on the table. We'll have to defeat the motion in order
Well,
to,
let me clarify my motion, if I may.
okay?
My motion was to adopt this plan. And on page 8, it articulates specifically that it's for 1.1 million for the Community College Developmental Education Initiative. The other outlines to be, in my mind, to be developed.
To be determined.
Yes, to be determined funds.
It actually starts on page 5.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at this.
Yeah, the strategy start on 5. There's the $5 million that we were appropriated expressly for projects.
That we have to accept because the legislature gave them to us.
And then
And then
8
the-
is
The
the
back page 8 is where it specifically talks about the dollars. So my motion was on this plan, which I believe further outlines the exact funding and how it's working.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Wait, I want to make sure, do you have any questions about my motion, Lynn, or can I?
Yeah, I do. I mean, if we're approving this one as written for El Paso Community College, which I'm ready to approve that, how do we distinguish that we're not also approving these other ones as written, even though they say to be determined? I mean,
If you look at the first few pages, it defines the plan, the goals, the strategies, etc. That is the plan that you're approving. And then within that, it's only the 1.1 million,
It's in
which
this
is
one.
also in another item in here, so that you will see it separately. That is all we are asking for. We are not asking approval for 5 million. We're not asking approval for the additional
3 million.
3 million at all.
can we just have a plan, a motion that specifically refers to the 1.1 million then?
Is that going to be
Plan in the works.
separately?
I mean,
Or
can
is
you
that-
clarify your motion to?
Okay.
All right,
There is
do
another
you,
item.
okay, wait a minute. Y'all need to, if y'all are going to do that, we either need to vote
On the motion.
on the motion, or you both need to withdraw your motion and your motion and your second. That's up to you all.
Okay.
But if I counted correctly, the motion passes.
Yeah.
So you can either pass the motion with note that Dr. Phillips with her concerns, or we can rescind your motion and your second and further discuss and make an amendment to the motion. Is that correct?
It is correct.
Aha. Okay.
I don't want to vote against the 1.1. I was going to, after we had that motion, I was going to suggest that we separate the money out.
So we can
in
pull
our
Lynn in the back
discussion.
room and beat her up and... Is that what you're saying? What are we doing here?
Better not go to the back room.
Okay.
And certainly pass the plan to preserve judgment on that if you choose to do it that way.
It is part of the...
It's
the
part of the
plan.
plan.
For the
It's
plan.
part of
I'm
the
not for
plan.
the plan.
Strategies.
Okay, she's not for the
I'm
plan.
not ready. I don't have anywhere near enough information to approve the whole plan and the strategy.
Okay, so if we voted, we can either vote as the motion and second are on the table, or we can pull the motion and second off. What is your pleasure? The person that made and seconded the motion?
I think we go forward with it.
Fine. Fine. All in favor?
Aye, already.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay, we have 3 in favor, 1 opposed. So, for the record, motion carries.
Dang, that must have been the hardest one inside of it.
Are y'all doing this because it's my last committee meeting? Is that it?
Yeah, we planned it.
Thanks very much. Okay, agenda item 5 is consideration of adopting the staff recommendation relating to the match for the AmeriCorps Vista project. Dr. Laredo, Assistant Commissioner of P16 Initiatives, will present this item, if she dare.
The AmeriCorps Vista project is a program that comes to us from the federal government through CN Corporation, and it is also a connected grant to the foundation. Gretchen Flatow is here in case you have any questions of her. This grant is currently part of our Gates grant in Houston for creating that college-going culture and working in the schools. There is a Vista worker assigned at each of those schools. We also have that project connected in San Antonio, which recently was granted an award for their performance. We would like to continue this project for the last year. It'll be in its 3rd year, and there is a match, and it's not $148,000. I need to correct that. The match is only $91,000. We got it down. CNS Corporation was willing to provide more to us. The match is 1 staff salary that we currently have. I mean, the person is on salary of the coordinating board, and then the remainder is $36,000 in marketing things for the program. And so I'm asking permission to continue for its last year of funding with the match. The foundation is matching, is it 92, I think, roughly? $92,000.
So it's a match between the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and our foundation?
That's right.
Okay. All right. Are there any questions? You were telling me before the meeting about how successful it is in Houston and the hard work that you're doing in Houston and San Antonio.
We've been working with that
That's
team.
great.
That school system has really been most accommodating. It's very difficult when you're taking a grant into a system that is huge. I mean, there's so many area superintendents, but they have been very workable. We're going into our last year there. We have some preliminary data already that is really astonishing data, because it has shown that across the 8 high schools that we're working with the feeder middle schools, that the numbers of college-going students has increased. Now, we don't know the variables quite yet that have affected it, whether it's totally because of this grant, but we'll be looking at that deeper this year. But it definitely shows that whether it's the system, because they have a philosophy that they are a college-going culture school district, if it's based on that, plus the efforts of what the Gates Foundation has done for this, plus the efforts with Vista, then it looks very promising.
Well, and interestingly enough, you're working in the one part of the district that is largely Latino, which is exactly where we want to target. And you're working with Dr. Thelma Garza, who's phenomenal. So hopefully you're getting the kind of support you need.
We're also attached to the community college there, to Texas Southern, and to the University of Houston. So it's not only the Vista partnership with the Gates, with our foundation, with the IHEs. I mean, it's a lot of levels of work, and it definitely is showing some promise.
In San Antonio, are you working with multiple districts or just one?
The one district.
Which one?
Do you know which one is
SAISD, no?
It's about the same thing with the pathway. It's part of that pathway.
Oh, it's part of Pathways?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Via the communities in school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
they
their
just awarded
foundation.
the coordinating board an honor for being a great partner.
Wow, that's great.
Yes.
So this will be our last year,
We
and
could give ourselves a star award.
yeah.
That's what we tried to do.
Quick question, Madam Chair.
Yes, Dr. Phillips.
Down here on your evaluation, you have evaluation will measure blah, 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 college applications, which that's great. But then you don't include the number of college applications or the number of students admitted to college under the performance measures. I just wanted to understand.
And we're trying to look at that for the tracking. That's one of the things we're increasing in this next evaluation design. Gretchen and I spoke, looking at their continuation going into college and their continuation through. Gretchen and I were talking about that this morning, because we're trying to scale this evaluation to really be much more impactful. So because of the data we're seeing right now with the completion of the college applications, are they going through and where they're standing? So that kind of information I hope to be able to give you at the end of the next evaluation.
So but for the next evaluation, this current one that's going on, we're going to see whether there's an increase in college applications.
Applications and continuation,
Okay.
once they get in there.
Okay.
Have they talked about in the high school, when we talk about FAFSA completion, about sending those forms home the first day of school with the free and reduced lunch forms?
No, but that could be something. I meet with the principals this Thursday.
Yeah. Could you mention that to them? When we first talked about it, where'd David go? We talked about it maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and at the time there was some question as to the privacy, but if they're sending it home anyway, in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, for that matter, we could even push it back. But if there were to be a letter from the principal, I mean, it wouldn't cost a nickel. If there were to be a letter from the principal on the free and reduced lunch food forms that every single student gets in English and Spanish, that would say, do you know that you could be eligible for a free ride in college, and here's what you need to know, and have the form attached and say, here's the person in our school building that can help you.
We can certainly bring it up for discussion.
Okay.
To see what could happen.
I've always wanted somebody to do it.
In some school districts, they're having days, like the day that the kids take the PSAT, the accounting firms are having volunteers, and the parents are coming while the kids take the test. They're filling out the FAFSA.
That's
form,
great.
which would be a great thing to. What do y'all call it? Take statewide? What's the word for that?
Scalability.
Scalability. I've always wanted to say that. Take to scale.
Move it to scale.
Move it to scale.
Yeah, you might have that kind of brainstorming session with the principals and mention that and other things that could get the FAFSA not only into their hands but with support, so that at each campus it would say, this is the person and here is his or her phone number, and they will help you in English or Spanish or any other language that those schools feel like they need.
I'll report back after
Right.
I've been over there Thursday.
Thank you. Any other discussion on agenda item 5? May I have a motion to adopt the staff recommendation relating to the match for the AmeriCorps Vista project?
So, second.
Ms. Mendoza moved and Dr. Phillips seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 6 is discussion of the uniform recruitment and retention strategy, preliminary evaluation report, and implementation plan for connection to agency funding and reporting. Dr. Laredo?
Let me just say that this is a legislatively mandated item. This year we have done some different things that I think surprised the institutions. Number one, we had the plans all reviewed by outside reviewers for determining or identifying what might be some best practices that are happening out in the systems. You know that the 2-year, 4-year, and technical schools are the ones that are all required to submit these. All of them were submitted except for one, and I've been told now that that one will be here Friday. But in doing that, we did identify some best practices. We also identified some programs that were not doing much. The purpose is to really look at recruitment and retention and the success factor. And that is what we're trying to get them to do, to look at their current data of where they are, who they admit, and who they are responsible for getting through and not flunking out or asking them to graciously leave their institutions. For those plans that were not as strong, we sent them back. We sent them back to every institution with the comments from the reviewers and asked them to reevaluate their plan and resubmit it. They have done that, and those who were considered to be strong plans, we asked permission of the presidents to post them on our website, which we also have done. What we have gone one step further, and if you will look at there's a slide in your packet. What we are looking at as part of the effort of this URRS next plan, which does not go out until July, and they have until December 1 to resubmit, I sat down with Susan Brown, the Assistant Commissioner for Planning and Accountability, and with Dr. McGregor Stevenson on the academic side of the House to identify those things in the agency that really affect institutions if they don't have them. And so as we look at where we are with closing the gap and the request by the Strategic Planning Committee to look at an accelerated method for looking at 4 critical areas, which is Hispanic representation, the STEM field areas, engineering, nursing, math, science, technology, looking at educator quality, which affects everything across the board, and then the research. Looking at that accelerated action plan and going into the elements of the URRS plan, which is getting them to specifically, you can go to the next slide, Mary, which is getting them to specifically begin to address the numbers that they are reporting here to the agency. You don't just do a plan without monitoring it and seeing whether you're achieving what it is you're trying to do. The institutions are going to be asked to look at those critical areas and identify within their plan how they're going to improve their recruitment and their retention rate, their college completion rates, and especially in those critical science areas. This, we hope, will also lead us to some research and some best practices that can then be scaled across institutions where they are having difficulty. Next slide. And the last part of this is based on the request from the board, is what can we do to connect this plan and make it real? Well, there are institutions who want their programs approved. There are institutions who would like to receive more grant funding from the coordinating board. They want facilities money. They want also to look at their compliance in terms of their whole system. And then lastly, but not least, whatever other things the coordinating board might identify. So what we're doing this time around, the next step, is connecting that plan to the impact that it could have on their institutions if their plans are not becoming viable, living, breathing plans that help them move to closing that gap and to increasing the number of students who come through certificate or degree programs. To do this, we feel that we need to have a committee. We have scheduled a meeting for July 27th to meet with a cadre of representatives of these 4 levels of institutions, to look at our proposed plan and to get their thoughts and feedback so that we can then develop a rule to then come back to the board or the committee in September, then to the board in October with implementation with the new plan coming in December. And so that is what we are trying to do with these plans so that they don't feel that they're sent and nobody has looked at them. We definitely looked at them this year, which I think came as quite a surprise, because I know the commissioner did get some phone calls.
This is great. Very exciting.
So that's where this is to let you know how we're moving, and we are trying to address the concern of the board so that the plan is connected to the efforts of the agency.
That sounds great. Ms. Mendoza.
Timeline, with respect to when is your goal for having the impact linked to the evaluation process?
In December, when they, as soon as we have the final
Okay.
approval from the board in October, the notice will go out.
Okay.
So that they know that their plan coming in December 1
Number one, okay. Great.
has got to, there will be an impact as they go through this year, because then next July, when we look at their data points, then we'll also, because that then feeds them into the next preparation of the next plan.
Okay, other questions or comments?
Great.
Okay, this does not require action, so if there are no questions, we'll move to the next agenda item, which is Agenda Item 7, Discussion and Preliminary Evaluation Report on P16 Regional Councils. Dr. Laredo?
I wanted to,
Robin?
and I apologize that I was not here for the last board meeting where I know that this was a question that was raised. Unfortunately, I had to have emergency surgery, and so I wasn't here to be able to speak to this issue, but
Next time, we'll move the meeting.
let's just say I might have been in here the next day if they would have let me in the building, but I don't think they would have let me in the building. What we did is to go back so that we could give you some history on the P16 councils and the funding that they have received, but more importantly, how they have responded to the work based on the performance outcomes that we've asked of them. Our intent really has been to groom these councils so that they realize that the term "it takes a village to educate a child" is not something you just hear casually. They are the village. They are the constituent holders of the village where our school districts lie, where our community colleges sit, where our universities sit. And they must be the ones that work as a team with the school systems to make education what it needs to be for kids in their system. And that has been our intent, to take these councils and to wean them so they become independent on their own and then also can groom other councils. So we'd like to show you the data because you do have in another item, not in this one, a request for some continued funding into the next year. And Robin's going to present the results.
Thank you. Yes, I'm going to give you an overview of the preliminary results of the evaluation. We do annual evaluations of all of the projects, and the P16 Council is in progress at the moment.
Do we have a handout on that, or?
No, I don't think you do.
Do you have the slides?
Is it 9? It's not 9.
Yeah, I keep coming to that 9 also.
No.
No, it's not 9.
I know.
Yes. Oh, where is it there? It's under PNS committee. No, this is P16 Council. There's 2 of them under there.
Would you like us to skip that one and go to the next one and you can
Oh,
come
wait,
back?
it's on
or-
the back of this.
Oh, it's on the back. Which
I
one?
think maybe this is it.
That's
No?
not. I think she found it. Do you have yours with you, Robin? Let's just talk to the paper copy, and then we can get it to them.
Yeah, we'll get it to you. I'm
Okay,
sorry about
that's
that.
fine.
I thought they had it. So we start always with our evaluations with the overall goals of the program. So as you're probably aware, and as Judy just said, they're regional change agents, and that's the main goal for these P16 councils. It's a systemic effort, and their overall goal is to engage community stakeholders to create a college-going culture. And as she was just saying, that's a village, parents, K through 12 teachers, community college, K through 12 administrators, business, workforce boards. So the P16 councils have, many of them already existed before we ever started giving them any kind of funding or enhancement. So in 2008 was the first set of enhancement grants. There was over about 435,000 that was awarded to 22 different P16 councils, and at that point all of them were given to existing P16 councils. By 2009, the funding had increased to $787,000 approximately for the overall, and there were 17 P16 councils that received funding that year based on 4 different areas in which they made a commitment, and they could commit to one or all or several or all 4 of these different goals. So they got funding depending on which of the goals or how many of the goals they committed to meeting. And they had to do with staff support, increasing staff support for the partnership, professional development, helping faculty and K through 12 teachers understand the college and career readiness standards, engaging in data-driven decision-making, which has been a big partnership between the coordinating board, TEA, and these P16 councils, and then working with the HB 400 schools, the low college-going rate schools, identified. There are 2 phases to the way we've been evaluating the P16. The first phase is a process evaluation where we're looking at outputs. In other words, what have you done? Since this has been, especially in the first couple of years, a systemic effort to build capacity and to build partnerships and discussions among stakeholders, we've looked at things like the number of the council meetings that they've held, the outreach activities that they've had, and how they've impacted the stakeholders themselves. We're still in this first phase, but as we move into the next fiscal year and the next funding, we're going to be looking at a second phase, and that is an impact evaluation, where we're starting to look now more on outcomes. What is the impact of the P16 councils? How is it affecting their college-going rates and their college completion rates? And also looking at best practices, identifying the councils who have had an impact in different areas, and some may have more impact in one area than another. I'll talk about that a little later, how we're looking at that. And then identifying promising practices related to the impacts to help them learn from each other about how to improve their agenda and their activities. The P16 Council grant, as I said, had in 2008 was reported on in the Consolidated Annual Evaluation Report. And just to remind you that a little bit again, there were 4 goals for that one: building the strong partnerships, regional meetings for teachers, faculty, business, community, and workforce leaders, increasing the college-going and completion culture, and developing long-range strategic plans. And when I get you this slide, you'll see that we evaluated them based on their progress in meeting these goals, and 79% of them were rated as being very effective. That means they went above and beyond what they promised to do. 19% were effective, 5% were effective, and 19% were in progress, and that's because there were a handful of programs that were not funded until the summer of that year, and so they didn't have the full range, and we didn't have everything in on them yet. So we gave them that flexibility to say they were in progress. In 2009, again, there were 4 specific goals that we looked at because these were the goals that were laid out in the RFA for the programs. Increasing staff support, again, the professional development, focusing on the data-driven decision-making, and targeting the HB 400 schools. We looked at their preliminary reports. Now, the final data isn't in for these programs. We're not done with this project year as of yet. And so what we're seeing in their preliminary reports, about 88% of them were rated as on target, And about 6% of them had insufficient data at this time for us to be able to determine where they stood, and 6% we felt were a little bit behind where they should be at this point. That doesn't mean that they won't catch up by the end, but that's what we're seeing with their preliminary reports. And again, their final reports are not in yet. However, we did look at what they were doing to try to find out more about what we can learn about these 4 areas and who's doing a good job. And with the help of the project coordinators, Priscilla Martinez, we identified 4 of these programs that have done, were really on target for achieving the goals in these areas. The first goal is staff support. You can see the South Plains Council in Lubbock has hired a full-time director, and they've been holding quarterly meetings. They have engaged in Go Center development, and even more importantly, they have developed strong partnership agreements with a wide range of stakeholders, from the public and private schools to business and industry, faith-based organizations, as well as higher education. And if you see the literature on partnerships, you'll know that that's one of the most difficult things to do, is to develop these kind of partnerships. So they have been doing, seems like an excellent job at this point in that area. Next. Professional development. The Council for Education Excellence in Laredo came out as having some interesting and exemplary potential here. One of the things that they're doing, and we talked about this, is the need for vertical alignment. And they have already engaged their teachers in math and English vertical alignment projects as part of their professional development. And that's a very important aspect, something that the P16 councils can do a good job of bringing those people together, because they are of the community, across the community. And then the Deep East Texas Council, looking at data-driven decision-making in Nacogdoches, they have been very successful in working with the data that's been provided to them and preparing reports for each of their 15 districts. They have a lot on their plate with 15 districts that they're serving. And so they've had those and distributed reports, completed and disseminated reports to each of the districts on their data, so that they start looking at data decision-making, data-driven decision-making. And then finally, the Lower Rio Grande P16 Council in Harlingen has been working very directly with the HB 400 schools, and they've been providing direct services, such as peer mentoring, career planning, and doing a lot of the financial aid sessions and college planning sessions for students. So those are some of the things that are happening right now this year among the different P16 councils. In terms of the process evaluation, we looked at outputs, and as somebody already told you, there were 220 people that attended the June meeting. Overall, there have been 773 participants in the P16 institutes over the last year, the 4 institutes that have been held. Most interestingly, there were people from 17 institutions attending these institutes that were not among the funded projects. The funded projects were required to attend. Those that were not funded were not required to attend, and yet they are sustaining themselves to the extent that they're still very involved in the P16 network. We've also been working very closely with them on data-driven decision-making. THECB, in partnership with TEA, has provided them data in a number of different areas. You can see some of these areas in pre-K through 5th grade. And then in the next one for middle school. And also for high school data elements. Now, not only did they get this data to work with and instructions at the beginning on how to work with it and how to understand it, how to interpret it, what to do with it, there have been training sessions held at the coordinating board with these P16 councils to help them understand how to more effectively use the data in decision making. And these have been very, very heavily attended, and there seems to be a lot of interest and support for more data from the councils, that they're asking for more data. So going on to the 2009 final evaluation, which we're in the process of working on right now, these are some of the elements that we're going to be looking at in terms of data collection. looking at K through 12 schools, how many students are served. Again, this is a process evaluation. Looking at the partnerships, the events, and the teachers, how they've been impacted. In 2010, we're then going to continue the evaluation and look more at impact of a particular area, because in 2010, one of the goals is parent involvement, and that's going to have a much more direct service impact on the part of the P16 councils that are engaged in that. And so we will be looking very specifically at the impact on the parents, doing pre- and post surveys of the parents participating in these efforts, and the number of parents and students involved in the outreach, as well as evaluations of the training of the P16 sites on this parent involvement initiative. And then we're also going to move more into the best practices. We want to focus on 3 different areas, as I said before. We're looking for P16 councils that have shown some exemplary behavior in partnerships and understand what they were doing well, and that we can pass that on to other P16 councils. Those that have been improving the K through 12 student success, as indicated by persistence rates and graduation rates, and improving the college going, looking at the college going rates and the college persistence rates in their area, and identifying them that way, and then seeing what their practices are that have helped them to have that kind of an impact in their region. That's where we are at the moment. And if there's any questions, I'd be glad to ask. It seems like they finally did get the slides. So,
Okay, questions or comments from anyone?
I have a question. On the RFPs, is part of that, do they get the support of the school board and the superintendent before they, do we include that?
I'd have to ask the program coordinator, because I'm not, do they have to have a letter, do you mean, when they apply?
Supporting
they have
their
to have
work.
the...
I think in terms of impact, if we could incorporate that into the process, that they have the support of the superintendent and the school board, and if they could make presentations to those people, the impact would be a lot better. And, I'm sorry, another snarky comment, but when I hear that 40 superintendents were at a meeting and not one of them knew about college readiness, I got to wonder, what are the P16 councils doing? That's disheartening.
Well, and I think the other thing, too, but I think your point is well taken. We can certainly include that. That's not a problem. But remember, we only have 35 councils, and when you look at 1,100 school systems, we don't have enough. We're trying to grow more councils, and that may be the issue.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it just, the snarky self wants to look and see how any of them.
But your suggestion to do that is a good suggestion, and it could be done.
Where was it that we said that the superintendents didn't know about college readiness?
That was at that meeting you went to last week.
The one that you made reference to it at...
So David said that...
15.
But they did.
With the 40 superintendents that were present.
Yeah, it was my impression that they did. I know that one superintendent is on a P16 council, and that's what they do, is discuss college
We have 4
readiness.
superintendents in our council.
Yeah, and yours do. The ones from San Antonio are actively involved.
And we also have a representation from the Board of Trustees Coalition. So
3 of your superintendents, well, 2 superintendents, Northeast, Northside, and then 1 representing San Antonio. She wasn't the superintendent, but a representative. They know.
Oh, yeah, they know.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking if there was it was already agreed that the P16 Council could come and make a presentation on, how to use data to drive decision-making or something like that.
Judy said that could certainly be done. I mean, the ones that we've seen, there's only about a dozen that were working on that partnership specifically for the enhancement grants, and they were involving superintendents.
Yeah.
But again,
that's good.
We've got a few programs, and so
I really appreciate your report. I now understand how you've been evaluating them and how you're moving forward with that.
So I guess the point would be, Lynn, that a lot of these councils have representation of superintendents as well as board.
Well, and I know one of them is meeting this week. The West Houston is meeting this week with the superintendents that are involved in their P16 councils.
Well, I think that one thing we can do is, we have a small group that are doing this, but as we get into the best practice research, we can highlight those practices for others across the state to encourage them, as you said, the scalability, to scale up to that. But it takes some time to gather that information and then be able to share that back to others to convince them that this is something that you need to be doing.
Right.
From what I'm being told by participants in those meetings, that's exactly what y'all are starting to do, is to share best practices and learn from one another as to what works best and how to reach everyone the best. In some of the bigger cities with P16 councils, they don't have superintendents that are actually on the council. So in order to make sure that they're bought into it, they then meet separately with them and make sure that they understand what's going on. So
I just think if you're going to be change agents, you have to.
You have to have them.
You have to have the school board and the superintendent.
Right.
Absolutely.
Those, we talked once before, I've been on 2 different school campuses. Their performance review board, or whatever it's called, it's just a group of teachers and parents that meet, and they have the numbers, but they don't do anything with them. And I'd love for the P16 councils to develop a pro forma way that those
that's what they're
groups,
doing.
Well, that was one of the goals.
they're required to meet. And so if you can have them meet and have the right information.
That was one of the goals this year, was to help the council start to develop data-driven decision-making. And, of course, that had to start with the data and getting them to see it and interpret it. But they are seeming to be, so we don't have the final report in, starting to use it to make decisions. And that's...
Well, this group is required for every campus. And so if you can get them to plug into that, it's required by law. And so if you can get them plugged directly into their reports, that would be
We'll see
great.
how many of them are plugged into it. That would be an interesting question.
It's my understanding that E3, which is the one in the Austin area, did that presentation and helped the P16 councils develop I believe there were 15 indicators that they were looking for. Am I making that up, or did somebody tell me that?
No.
Okay, that's what I thought.
I forgot what that's called. Campus
I have a
based.
couple questions, but I'll wait. Any other questions or comments?
Great report, thank you.
Couple of questions. One, I've been told that the P16 councils, instead of receiving $50,000 per council, it's been reduced to $30,000 per council.
That would be Judy. I wouldn't know about the money.
It was between 35 and 50,000 they could apply, depending on the work they were going to do.
Right.
So they weren't all funded at 50,000, but we did cut back to $30,000 into this next cycle.
Okay. I would like to request that between now and the agency operations meeting, which is when that will probably come up, I'd like to request that we look again at $50,000 and justify it. If it's not justified, then I have no problem in the world with it. But if we're putting the burden and the responsibility on P16 councils, and they need that in order to do whatever it is they're doing, then I would hope that, I think that that's probably one of the best ways to spend $1 in this agency, because that's where the rubber meets the road. If I'm wrong and if they don't need that money, I'm fine with it. But I'd like between now and the agency operations meeting for that to be spelled out, and for the P16 councils maybe even to enumerate or itemize the kinds of things they're looking at. I would hate for us to cut them back just because. If there's a reason, I'm fine with it. Secondly, it's my understanding that the data that they were given over the last year or two, that TEA charged $10,000 to get that data. I have spies everywhere, sorry. But anyway.
Be a Susan Brown question. I don't know how much they charged. I know they charged something, but I don't know.
Y'all are all pointing fingers. So if in fact they were charged to get the data.
Oh, no.
No,
they weren't charged.
No, not them.
If
we were charged. I'm sorry. If the agency was charged $10,000, what I would like to also ask.
It sounds like Susan Brown.
More than that?
And let me just say, any of the data that we have had that is available, the councils have access to it. It's just that there is certain data on the TEA side of the house that, because we're higher ed, we did not have as easy of access. Susan Brown worked with me very closely to open doors and get what we could get. Go ahead, Susan.
Yeah, Judy actually paid the bill, but I think it was about $15,000 or $20,000 in total.
Our agency paid to TEA for the data. I think that we need to figure this out. To me, we're putting a lot of responsibility on the shoulders of volunteers in a P16 council. I mean, granted, they may be the deans of education or the assistant superintendents or whatever, and that's sort of kind of part of their job. But to me, we're putting a big burden on these P16 councils throughout the state, and we need to support them appropriately. If this money is not available, first of all, if TEA is charging us money, that's an initial question that I would have. Why is one agency charging another so that P16 councils can have the amount of data that they need? That's my first question.
We've asked that question too, yeah.
Well, maybe if they know that the board is asking that question, that why is our agency paying TEA for information that a P16 council needs in order to function?
We can ask that question.
Well, it's just
Part of it is
more
their
directly a
staff
question,
time.
why are they charging the coordinating board? Because they're not charging, I mean, let's just make clear, they're not charging individual P16.
No, right.
We understand that.
Right.
They're charging us, but I don't understand why, because they provide much more data to us, and in fact, we do analysis that we provide
Sure.
to them and don't charge for. So I think part of this is a change in leadership at certain positions, and we just have to work with that there's some different people in place than have been previously. So I mean, we're going to follow up on that.
Okay. And secondly, I guess maybe at agency ops this can come up again as well, but it seems to me that this is important data, and I know that the P16 councils have been trained or are being trained in the Lone Star system. Is that what it's called? But I remember one of the original meetings when you actually were in my breakout session, Susan, and the information that you gave to this one or I guess there were many councils in that room, they were just so excited because it's the first time they've seen collective data with the kinds of information that they needed. And we're always screaming data, data, data. And for us to withhold data and make them go after it on their own, I think is the wrong message. That we don't want to send that message.
Okay, and I don't think we are. I mean, Susan, you may want to clarify what went on this very week and what will go on.
Actually, as a matter of fact, in addition to, last week we had meetings with the P16 councils where we gave them additional training, and we trained them on the Lone Star system and talked to them about where to find additional data and where it is automatically updated on the web so that they can pull and go searching on different websites and what, that they may be interested in. In addition to that, this past week we had what we call a Data Fellows program, which is we brought in representatives from the Big 8 school districts for the first group, and then next week we're having another group that's going to come in, and this is the travel and everything is being funded actually through a Gates grant. And we provided those individuals with a lot of data on their students. We focused mostly on the data that, because these are ISD employees, on the data that they didn't have, and that was the K-12 to higher ed linkage, because that's the part that they don't have. They have their own students and that sort of thing. And many of, especially at the larger school districts, have some very good data people on board, on staff, and they do a lot of looking at it. And they actually were talking to each other, and they learned quite a bit about what is out there, because they are so focused on the K-12, don't look at the higher ed. They didn't know that even our high school to college linkage data is out there on a continuous basis. And so we're working with those school districts to get them the data that they need. We also were able to provide them information where we looked at a lot of their data on a local level, and we gave them their own district data. We couldn't share it. It's not FERPA compliant to share with everybody, but we could give each district their own information.
But part of what was also happening was not just sharing that, but they were working with our staff to help design an interface that made sense to the people in the ISDs to get at the data. I mean, they can get at it now, but say, okay, what makes sense for you? And actually it went over very well. And what was interesting is we received a certain amount of Gates funding for it. They actually wanted us to do some other things, and we asked that part of it be designated for this because access is important. But we haven't had enough access over time. There's going to be another group coming in. When I was at Houston on Wednesday for the Pathway sort of gathering of we're all going to do it now, Houston Endowment, I mentioned this, and Charles Cook at HCC offered to host a meeting for all the ISDs in Houston and the institutions for our staff to come in and do a similar thing with them.
Right.
So we're really working hard to empower people at the local level to use data because they have to use it. It pairs up nicely with Achieving the Dream and its efforts. But this is, to some extent, modeled after the National Center for Education Statistics Fellows, which bring people up to the federal level, teach them about the data. And part of what they're being asked to do is to also teach other people how to do it. So we're going to have a cohort of people that really know the data well. Some of the districts actually asked to send people, paid to send people on their own.
They sent some additional people, so some of them had 2 or 3 different people at the table. Now, the Gates grant that we got only paid for 1, so, but they paid for that out of their own expense.
And we learned, I think, if I recall correctly, that the people who really do the analysis in districts don't necessarily know what other parts of the district are sending to TEA or other things. So there's actually some level of that you see at higher ed institutions is people from different parts of the campus not knowing things. And so figuring out how to communicate directly with the right people is part of what we're acquiring as well.
Well, and it seems like most of the P16 councils involve more than one school district. So it's not like bringing in one school district to get that data for that school district. I mean, San Antonio has, what, 20 or something?
We have 15.
and you know, the Houston area has like 21 or so, and the only one that I've found that really can make it more succinct is El Paso, you know, because they work with one community college, one public university, and the 3
They're
school
actually
districts.
expanding that because they're going to include Isleto and Socorro in their pathways.
That's great.
So they're expanding that.
And I don't mean to say that our agency isn't giving the support. It's just that I think that data is probably the most important thing, that otherwise it's more of a feel-good and anecdotal type of feeling of, yeah, we're bringing awareness or something, which, you know, that's not measurable, and that's not worth the $50,000 or even the $30,000. But so I guess my encouragement is to continue to give as much support as possible and to talk to TEA about doing the same thing. Enough said. Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, this was just for discussion, so we move to agenda item 8, which is discussion and preliminary evaluation report on the work-study mentorship program. And that's Robin again, and Dr. Laredo.
Okay, did you want to say something to begin?
No.
Okay.
This is a evaluation report that you all had requested from the last meeting, and we've come with a background and the report of where we are right now. The program does not end until August 31st.
Okay. Okay, so the Work-Study Mentorship Program, just to give you a little bit of background, was mandated by the 80th Texas Legislature. And the goals for the program are, again, to create college-going culture in the high schools. And they do this by providing role models to high school students, by bringing college students in as mentors. And they assist high schools with college-going events and counseling. And a secondary goal is to help the college students persist in college. So it's also targeted at underrepresented college students for funding. There's been so far 2 years of the Work-Study Mentorship Program. In FY 2008, 27 institutions were funded with an average award of $94,000. In FY 2009, 32 institutions were funded with an average award of about $75,000. There's $2.5 million a year that goes to this program. One thing to keep in mind is that through the legislation, these funds are earmarked specifically for paying these mentors. They can't be used for any other purposes. So the funds are only used to pay mentor stipends. In 2008, which is the only year we have data for at this point, and we're not done with 2009, there were 799 work-study mentors employed at those 27 institutions. The program from the report that we have, not all of the schools reported race and ethnicity, which we've tightened that up this year, so we'll get better data, I hope, that they will all comply with. but from the ones that had reported, 56% were Hispanic and 24% African American, and the remaining 20% were of other national origins or races and ethnicity. So they are targeting Hispanic and African American populations primarily, as they're supposed to. They served 133 high schools across the state. Now, that's a small number of the overall high schools. An average number of schools for a site was 5, and they ranged anywhere from focusing on one particular high school to having 19 high schools represented in their program, but that was the Dallas Community College District, and that was spread across the entire district. So they're serving anywhere around an average of about 5 per program. There were 87,000, more than 87,000 high school students that were actually served by the program. Now, that doesn't mean one-on-one service. The mentors were involved in developing financial aid events, college fairs, as well as doing some one-on-one or group advising. So they served in multiple capacities, and they were able to impact 87,000, more than 87,000 students on those campuses. The cost of the program seems to be fairly within reason, I would think, but I'll let you judge that. The average cost per high school student served was just approximately $128 across the programs. And remember, the average cost per mentor really reflects the average stipend, about $3,100 per student. We can't say that this is a cause of the work-study mentorship program, but obviously there's some impact in these schools, because if we look at college-going rates between 2007 and 2008, which is only a one-year span, we see that the percentage change in college-going in the high schools served by the work-study mentorship program increased 3.3% compared to the entire state, all Texas public high schools, which increased only 2.8%. So even this is only a one-year change, so we don't expect a large percentage increase. The fact that they exceeded the overall state is notable. In 2009 and then into 2010, we're looking at 4 types of data collection and evaluation for these programs. One of the things that we're going to be getting now from the 2009 programs is identification of the mentors so that we can track them and look at their persistence. We didn't have that data for 2008. And we'll continue looking at the high school served and gathering the activity logs so that we know how many students are actually being served, as well as getting an annual report from the program directors so we can look at what successful programs are doing that are making them successful.
Okay, any questions or comments? How are the mentors attracted to this? I thought I saw an email that was sent out from maybe one of the community colleges or school districts, I can't remember what, saying, basically that this is available.
Well, the mentors are college students, so every program, they're based on the college campuses, has a different way of reaching their students. So that's one of the things we want to look at, is the ones that were most successful, especially in attracting Hispanics and African Americans, and the ones that were most successful in helping their students persist after they've been in this program, because the goal is not just to help the high school students, but to help these college students become more connected and therefore persist in college.
It's a great program. Any other comments or questions? Okay, it's 12:25. Do you all want to move on through the agenda and finish before we break for lunch? It's up to you all. Any comments or thoughts? We have agenda item 9 and 10, and I think, are the rest on, no.
Lois's. Yes, it's financial aid stuff.
And then 15, I think. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's the financial aid.
Right. So do y'all want to continue to move on, or? Yes?
Whatever you want to do.
Okay. Okay, agenda item 9 is consideration of adopting the staff recommendation relating to proposed activities to promote college readiness and success fiscal years 2010, 2011, including approval of projects to be considered by the Agency Operations Committee on July the 29th, 2009. And this item is something that we have a motion, so we have to take action on it, and Dr. Laredo will present.
You have a slide presentation in front of you, and I don't know if, because of the essence of time, maybe I shouldn't show it. I mean, you have it there, unless we can go through it quickly. What I have tried to do, Mary, go ahead and put it on. What I have tried to do is to schematically lay out the efforts of the work in the P16 initiative area, and ultimately looking at the bottom line of which is student participation and success. And that is achieving that magical number of 630,000 with the certificate number and degree completion as well. What we have done this past year is sat down as a team for the major units of the division, which is college readiness, educator quality, and outreach, and have as a total staff not only looked at our data, looked at the projects that we've had in place, but looked at the future and what we propose in terms of activities that address that college readiness issue, that address educator quality, and that address developmental education, with the outreach component as the base that helps us get that message out. Of course, what plays into that, too, is another component called retention. So what I've laid out is 4 different areas entitled College and Career Readiness, Developmental Education, Educator Quality, and Recruitment and Retention. Looking at college and career readiness, what we have identified are 3 major efforts that address pre-college readiness, that being the intensive bridge programs for high school students, the college readiness assignments, and the college preparation course and webinar. In your packet, I have provided you with a description of each of those projects and how they are funded as well. You've also received a new addendum this morning, which I would ask that you refer to that one and not the one that's in your packet, because we had to clarify a title. But the intensive summer programs, you know, we have had for the last couple of years. The statute, it is by statute. It has changed this year, which has provided us more flexibility in terms of the implementation and the guidelines for that program. And then looking at the college readiness assignments, which is what they will be working on in the near future, the assignments that the students will be using in the schools. And then lastly, the preparation courses and webinars that addresses one of the concerns that Dr. Phillips raised earlier related to working with students in the high school early on when they're showing that maybe they won't be college ready. This is a partnership effort with TEA in terms of that work, and that has been defined for you there. The second area within college readiness is looking at the various projects. The Pathway Project, which we referred to a minute ago, that is in San Antonio, originated in San Antonio, is now in the Houston area and, of course, in the El Paso area. And the intent is for that project to be scaled for other districts to begin to work with their IHE partners, their community college partners, and looking at their college-going culture, the success rate of their students in their first primary courses in college, and at the same time working with the teams where there is a disconnect so that students experience more success. The college readiness regional meetings, which are an effort that was brought to our attention, if you recall, in early fall of 2008, EPIC conducted approximately 12 or 13, was it 13, Lynette? Yeah, 13 meetings across the state to bring college readiness to the table and for people to understand the school systems involved, community colleges, business and education, P16 councils, et cetera. And it was brought to our attention that we needed to continue that work because we had only touched a very small portion. The Master College Readiness Special Advisors are a select team of 10 individuals divided up by specific regions representing institutions of higher education a project that we have identified to help us continue with that word of the college readiness standards. Previously, before I came here, all universities, colleges, all institutions were awarded a small bucket of money to have a college readiness person on their faculty or on their staff, and that funding is going out. So we're taking a different approach to then begin to work, still work within those regions, but to work on the college readiness effort. The Texas College and Career Readiness Standards marketing campaign is part of a very large campaign from the College Access Challenge Grant. It is federally funded. The RFPs for those who are applying for that funding are due at the end of the month. We have hired a director in our unit, Mr. Andy Kessling, and he's in the back. He will be overseeing this effort. We hope to have that project or the marketing campaign in place with a selected company by August. The P16 regional councils, you heard the evaluation about. You've heard what our efforts are as we move forth. The community partnerships are part of the College Access Challenge Grant. Federal funds are coming in through that effort. The College Connection is the same, 2+2+2 and 2+2, this high school to community college. We are again looking to continue their funding as they move into their second year. We have been told by the federal government that money from the first year that's not used can be carried to the second year and second year to the third year. The public high school education counseling sessions, you approved a grant previously under the College Access Challenge Grant to fund the Texas Counseling Association to develop a trainer-of-trainer model for preparing counselors to better deliver advice and college readiness standards within their high school. That project is almost at completion. They will do their official training, or second training, which you approved in addition to that grant for $35,000, I guess probably in March. That last training and the implementation will be at full speed the last week in August, with the service centers taking it over in September to do 4 sessions across the state in all 20 service centers in terms of training counselors. So that is moving on. And then the thing that we did not do with the counselors, we have done public school, but we did not think to do the higher ed counselors that are in colleges and universities, and so we are looking to extend them a contract to just do that training specifically with those individuals, not to develop any more material, but to do the college level training. Parent education programs that we have within this efforts is the scalability and working with our parent component, and the description of that effort is also in your packet. The one program that came to mind that really has stuck out across Austin is the FEDIA project. It's called FEDIA para Aprender, and it was a program that was initiated by Sylvia Acevedo with her company and implemented in the Austin Independent School District. And over 3 efforts on the part of her staff and the program they designed, the first FEDIA, I think they had approximately 2,000 Hispanic parents who showed up to learn about the process of college and career readiness, of what it takes to get their students into college. They told her it couldn't be done, so she tried another one. The second one she had 3,500 parents show up in a one-day event that takes them through different learning cycles so that when the parents walk out, they know what a FAFSA is, they know what they need to do in terms of applying for funding, but they also have a better understanding of the rigor that it takes for their students to have to be successful. And the last step of the process, in a full day of learning, they take a picture of the child in a cap and gown, either as a doctor, a lawyer, a carpenter, a fireman, a policeman. And the last FEDIA that she had, which I think was in April, they had 7,300 parents. She has a massively successful program. She's been already called across the country to scale that program up. we would like to fund her to do a trainer of trainer model to train all P16 councils in the state with school personnel to take this into a school system and to utilize within their efforts to educate the parent community. That is the largest stakeholder out there in the community because the parent is a child's first teacher. The second phase of the work is in developmental education, and as we look at that bucket of work, in your package, Tamara spoke this morning to the effort of the Community College Developmental Education Initiative, to the Developmental Education Demonstration Projects, to the Texas Association of Developing Colleges, which is a grant that comes to the coordinating board. It is legislatively mandated. It is funds that come here that are sent through to the private 5 historically black colleges. This is probably the third cycle of funding in a continuation grant in terms of addressing the education of African Americans and more specifically the preparation of teachers of color coming from their programs. The AVID pilot project is an extremely recognized and well thought of program that's really in the K-12 arena. The commissioner was approached a few months back by Jim Nelson, former commissioner of education, who heads the AVID initiative because they would like to scale that model into post-secondary education, which has been widely received by higher ed institutions already asking us to put it on their campus because we want it there. We would like to enter into a collaborative venture with AVID to develop a pilot project of approximately 6 higher ed institutions to connect public ed with community colleges with the 4-year institutions in terms of the AVID demonstration project. AVID is also willing to put money at the table in order to scale this project, and we would like to do a small grant to begin a planning phase with them. The next effort is the Adult Education Transition Program that Tamara alluded to in developmental education, and then the model projects on developmental ed and adult education, and lastly, the accelerated program, which she also referenced. Under educator quality, we've already had several initiatives in place this year, and there are some that we are asking to go at a higher scale with more programs, as well as those in terms that are new. The Math, Science, and Technology Teacher Prep Academies are described in your packet. We've had those over the last 2 years. We are scaling now into the 3rd year and looking into the 4th, and then looking at some extensions. The College and Career Readiness Initiative, you know that we've had a major collaborative with 4 institutions across the state looking at the college and career readiness standards and implementing them in educator quality. We are also getting ready to do that in September in community colleges. And so we're taking it further down. The Centers for Teacher Education, the Teacher Education Preparation Demonstration Sites. The one that number 3 is the federally funded program, which you've already approved for Elizabeth Powers. That program is now in implementation this summer. You approved all of that in your, I guess, through April. And we went through the whole process during the academic year. Elizabeth will again come to you in the fall when the new grant is out by the federal government. The Teacher Education Preparation Demonstration Site is based on research. It is looking at a possible 1 site in the state. You have approved that model already. The RFPs will be coming in with the final program that is selected to be done so in July, with implementation starting in August. The pre-service practicum induction and in-service project is part of one that we also have with the Dana Center, and that has been described in your packet. The recruitment and retention effort is the one that we added because some of the work that we do that is legislatively mandated is connected to recruitment specifically and retention. The plans that I addressed earlier. The College for All Texans website is an effort that, of course, was here even before I got here. But you know what we have done with that website, the redesign of the website that we undertook this past year. We would like to move forward with another phase, and I don't know if you want any more addressed in that. If not, Matt and Casey are both here. The same team that has worked on the redesign has also been studying very seriously and with most regard to what it would take to maintain the extension of that portal, looking at the portfolios, looking at the other two major areas connected to there, the college estimator, et cetera, and they might want to come up in case they want to add to that. That's coming up under the College Access Challenge Grant. What we're trying to do is to do what we feel students would benefit from in terms of the additional information on that web portal that gave them some information on career choices, et cetera, on that financial aid estimator, and using our College Access Challenge Grant funds, which are usable funds specifically for that area. And then the next items are the Work Study Mentorship Program and the Summit. The mentorship program is legislatively mandated. Approximately $5 million comes to this agency that we need to send out to the institutions who apply. The Summit is to do a one-day training with potential applicants for this for the mentorship money, so that they are fully cognizant of what it is we are trying to achieve and the goals we are trying to achieve by giving them that money to put into their college systems. The last one is the Dallas African American Male Tutoring Project. Probably 2 years ago, because I've been here over a year, funds were provided for a project in Dallas, the African American Male Project in one of the Dallas high schools. A minimal amount of money was provided, $9,700. They utilized it very wisely, implemented some strategic activities in the high school to increase and encourage African American males to continue their efforts to post-secondary education. The evaluation results by the external evaluator deemed that the program had strength, but there was not enough money to have done what they should have done, describe the additional buckets of work that should have been in the project. Well, the community college district in Dallas picked that up, and they are now taking it to full scale across their community college system and are going to be implementing it, and have asked for a seed grant of $70,000 in terms of the instructional materials they will be using. The district will be putting in money. Each individual college, community college, will be putting in money, and this is a small seed grant to their efforts of continuing their work. They just took it to a much larger scale because they wanted to be carried on, and hopefully that other community college districts will take this same kind of effort on. Those are the 4 areas of work. What we've also done in terms of, if you look at your slide, that's how we have connected, because everything that we have done in many ways connects one over the other. They're not in isolation of each other. And as we look at evaluation, we will again be looking at those critical areas that the coordinating board is needing to address to close the gap, to reach that number by 2015, and at the same time to develop what can be scalable, that can impact and change systems so that what we do becomes a common way to operate in the near future. What you also have in your packet that was handed to you this morning is a chart, I guess would be the best way to describe it, that lays out, based on request, not only the strategy, but it defines the funding source. And that was in the addendum that was given to you this morning, because we modified it based on the request of the committee. The funding source, whether it's House Bill 1 money, or whether it's federally mandated, or whether it's legislatively mandated, so that you really have 3 kinds of funds. You've got the federal funds, you have the mandated funds, and then you have the funds that the legislature gave to us that, in terms, I guess the best way to describe would be discretionary. And so what we did is lay out for you what money would be what, so that you would know how we made those decisions. And then lastly, in your packet, the same item agenda, you see the items that we're asking for funding on this strategy sheet that need to be funded with 2009 funds that are completion of this year's money, and then looking at the funds that are 2010 and 2011. What we've tried to lay out for you and not come in pieces is the 2-year work that will help us close this gap and get us closer to that number. You will notice that some yet have not been defined because we didn't know when we did this whether or not a bill would be signed or anything might change in terms of the legislature. You are aware of House Bill 3. There will be work that we are doing with House Bill 3 that is going to impact our agency because of the new accountability system in public education. And so that is what you have before you.
Doesn't look like you've been doing anything.
Nothing.
The expression "your plate is full" is a little bit of an understatement. This is excellent, and I think the way that it's laid out for us in the different ways, both graphically and then listing with the description, as well as with the strategy and the chart that you've put together with which objective.
That was a question too, Ms. Bricker, that was posed by Dr. Phillips, and how are they connected?
Right.
Everything that we've done, we've connected to the P16 state plan that leads to participation and success. It is in our estimation as a staff, there's a lot of years of experience when you take the senior leadership. I wish I could say to you that, yes, there could be certainly other ways to spend the money. We have taken our best shot based on research, based on our own experience, based what we know that is out there, and also based on the evaluations that we have from some of these projects already. So that's how the decisions were made. Also, some of this is coming here because of the AOC request, so that it's all laid out and that you are fully aware of exactly where this money is going to be spent, and there's nothing that's not laid out.
Okay. Any comments or questions? Ms. Mendoza.
Okay, under E, recruitment and retention efforts, we have the work study mentorship program at $5 million. Is that in the highest grant?
2 years.
Sorry?
It's for 2 years.
For 2 years.
So it's about $2.5 million a year over the 2-year period, and then there's a range on the grant depending on what you apply for.
Maximum up to $300K, but that is the only noted program under the recruitment and retention efforts. For example, the Dallas African American Male Tutoring Project. We don't need additional funds. Is that what?
No, it's a $70,000, but it isn't going to AOC. What you have marked on here in the parentheses is AOC items.
Okay.
It only stays here at P&S. It's not over the $100,000 threshold.
Got it. Got it.
It's only a $70,000
Okay.
pilot.
All right.
And I might also need to clarify, because I don't want you to misunderstand this. The developmental education under the new white chart that you have that Tamara alluded to, the grant that will be going to El Paso, that is $1.1 million. And then, yes, and the accelerated one she made reference to for $225,000 is under the 209 funds. The other projects, the $5 million and the adult transition is the one that is part of the plan that is 210 money, and that may be something you want to consider to wait. I mean, I don't want to mislead you with that. That was a question that was raised by Dr. Phillips.
Okay.
But there are 2 projects there. One is for the El Paso, and the other one is the accelerated, which is funding from 2009. On your chart, it shows you the money that's coming out of the 2009 money that we need to earmark before August of 31. The rest is funding that's coming out of 2010, 2011 over the next biennium.
So basically, anything in fiscal year 2009 that is less than 100K, we're going to approve.
That is correct.
Right now.
Well, I hope.
Well, right, I mean, that's what we're considering.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
The
so,
rest is on the AOC agenda, and then Dr. Alonso, if he has any comments he might want to make, they are on his agenda.
okay.
Other comments? I have a couple of quick questions. Oh, that's where I wrote them down. Under B, College Readiness Initiatives, you mentioned that there hopefully would be more regional meetings. Do you have any scheduled, or?
No, the dates haven't been scheduled. We've just had preliminary contacts with the institutions
Okay.
so that we could get their buy-in to doing it, but we want to start in early fall. And Lynette may want to speak to that. There she is. Kristen is coordinating this effort with the colleges. Hope to have that finished up by July.
Madam Chair, we're doing 10 meetings, what we have planned. We have 10 higher ed institutions on board, and we have, I think, about 8 of 10 dates preliminarily set, September and October.
Okay. That's all. The other question I had came up in the meeting last Monday when we were talking about support for teacher quality and ways that maybe P12 can impact what's coming out of higher ed and what the needs are. We talked about, in particular, the fact that the commissioner is meeting on a regular basis with the deans of education, which I think it's this week. But it seems to me that the majority of alternative certification teachers, whether it's from Teach for America or any other, that they're making up the majority of the applicant pool. And so I would like to request that there be some relationship built with the ACP. I think probably the majority of them are being worked with anyway because they're coming out of either school districts that have a internal ACP or the regional offices which have ACPs, but there could be others that are like, I believe, I don't know if they're like private for-profits or whatever.
Yes, there are.
But it seems like, and some of the superintendents had responded to my question, it seems like if maybe 3 times as many are coming out of ACP, that we ought to have, a relationship built. And those are my only comments. Does anyone else have a comment? No? All right. The recommendation is to, let's see, consideration of adopting the staff recommendation relating to proposed activities to promote college readiness and success fiscal years 2010-2011, including approval of projects to be considered by the Agency Operations Committee on July 29, 2009. So the recommendation is adoption of staff recommendation relating to proposed activities, number 1, and number 2, approval of projects to be considered by the Agency Operations Committee on July 29, 2009. Can I have a motion for both of those?
So moved.
Bill? Okay. All right, moved by Ms. Mendoza. Is there a second? Wow.
No, I'll second that.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye. Are we going to have discussion?
Okay, I'm sorry. Discussion?
I just want to know what we're voting on here. For example, are we voting on the Texas College and Career Readiness Standards marketing campaign?
Yes, that's one of the agenda
I haven't
items.
finished my sentence.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Are we voting on that we will have one, or are we voting on a specific one which we don't know that we're voting for?
Aren't we voting to send it to Agency Ops for consideration?
That has already been approved. You approved it when we did the College Access Challenge grant process. We have not awarded that, so it'll be coming back when it is awarded, but it is a project that is in place. We've listed everything that's in place of the work that you either prior have approved or is coming forward.
So some of these we're voting for and some we aren't on this list?
Of the ones that are in your parentheses, are the ones, if you look at your blue sheet,
Where's the blue sheet?
you'll see all the projects are listed. You'll see them.
I didn't get what you were talking about when you said parentheses. I didn't.
It's on your
See what
the
that
blue
was.
sheet of item 9.
This?
Yeah, they're in parentheses at the end of the statement there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I didn't catch that.
Sorry.
It starts on the bottom of the first page.
And so, and tell me again what the parenthesis means.
Those are the items that are moving forth to AOC because of their size.
They're over 100K.
And on your sheet that you have right under your hand, Dr. Bricker, Dr. Phillips, it tells you the funding, so you'll know that some of those are legislatively mandated, and we've got to start.
Okay, so these are the only ones we're voting on then.
We are, it's my understanding,
You're
we're
voting on
approving the projects to be considered by the agency operations. That's the second part of the motion.
And then what you're approving in that first part is the work that is laid out for the next 2 years.
May I ask a question since
Absolutely.
I'm on ops and we're going to get this? Okay. When you send this to ops, this is money allocated to strategy, and this is, you know, the project framework and that sort of thing. Does it, when it goes through a procurement process, do some of these items then come back to AOC?
When we award grants?
Yes.
Yes, well, you'll know who they were awarded to based on on the process, and then you'll give the approval for those final projects.
So we actually, in some instances, are voting on the same money.
You may be voting on the RFA the first time, and then the second time will be the funding.
Top
And
line
Dr.
is
Alonso may want to clarify.
Discrete.
So we approve the programs and we approve the specific
Contracts. Now, if the contracts are less than a certain amount, they
Then they
don't really
wouldn't.
come.
No, they
don't
won't.
come to
It
the-
depends
They
on
don't
the
go to
size.
agency
But most of-
operations.
Right,
There
right,
needs to
right,
be,
right. I just
we've got Arturo and Bill to clarify the distinction between contracts and grants. That we've had a long discussion with Whit, and I don't remember if you were on the
call.
So if we could clarify, and Ms. Mendoza, you could, you know, say whether you recall it the same way as.
Right now, I'm not recalling anything. For the record.
Okay.
I cannot recall.
Go ahead, Bill.
Very simply, when you all approve a project that exceeds $100,000, whether it is a request for proposals or a grant that is directed by the legislature, but for which staff does have some modicum of discretion at least, that will then go to the Agency Operations Committee for its approval. And when that committee approves it, the standard practice under Board Rule 1.16 is to the effect that the vendors or grantees selected are approved by the board chair and vice chair. Once that approval is given, the board should be notified of the vendor or grantees selected at the next board meeting, when the commissioner lists the contracts, et cetera, that have been approved since the last board meeting. But at that point, that would be the end of the process, unless it's an ongoing project, which I think Dr. Laredo is referring to here, for bringing updates back to this committee. If it's not an update, I'm not quite sure what else it would be.
So the committee approves the project, and then it's let out, and it comes back, and the chair or vice chair approves the.
Ultimately, that
city.
concludes the process,
Yes.
other than the commissioner notifying the full board what vendor or grantees have been selected.
Does that answer your question?
Answers Brenda's.
You had a question. Does that answer your question?
It doesn't come back to ops?
If it's over 100K after.
It would go from here to agency operations.
Right.
That was the motion, wasn't it?
Right, we're approving the, let's call it the project framework, the strategy frameworks and the dollars. Then does it come back to ops if it's over 100,000?
Yes,
Yes.
All right,
it does.
so ops is in essence
Ops is the
approving
next.
things twice.
Ops is the next step.
Right.
Presuming that ops.
That's what I want to
Three times.
Presuming that Agency Operations Committee approves it, it then, upon selection or proposed selection of a vendor or grantee or set thereof, would go to the board chair and vice chair for final approval. And presuming they approve it, the next step in the process is for you all to be notified of that approval at the next board meeting or with the documents associated with that next board meeting, which would pretty well be the end of the process.
Which, just as an aside, is all the more reason for committee chairs to also sit on agency operations so that they can make that connection. Because I'm not on it and Lynn's not on it, we're both chairs of two different committees. And that would make the process a little bit better, because then we could speak to what happened at the committee meeting.
But I thought the answer to your question was no, that it only goes once to agency ops.
I know, and I heard yes, and then I think I heard no, so I still.
Well, it goes from here to agency operations, and then, presuming it's approved at agency ops, it goes to the board chair and vice chair, ultimately for final approval. It would not necessarily go back to agency operations.
What if a vendor is awarded a contract over X threshold? It does, wouldn't it go back to agency ops?
No, because at that point, presumably, agency ops has approved the request for proposal or other request that would have generated that ultimate agreement with that vendor. I suppose there could be somewhat of an anomalous instance where staff did not anticipate, and, well, then you wouldn't have gone to agency ops to begin with.
That's right.
It would be rather out of the ordinary for it to go to agency operations twice.
Right. My understanding is that for fiscal year '09, we are approving programs and funding that are less than 100K, that are listed here.
Yes.
That's right. So that's item number 1 under the motion.
Correct.
Okay, and item number 2 under the motion is the rest of the list of work that is going to
agency operations.
Which would be, in all instances, over 100,000
Right.
is the anticipated amount.
Is that 66 million?
The total, yes. Okay. That's my understanding.
May I make one
I
clarification,
guess
Madam
what
Chair?
I'm just going to need, and I can get with you guys afterwards, but, I mean, for $66 million to go to ops, I think you have the information that I'm going to want to see, but we can communicate about that after the meeting so we can make sure that it's in there. And it's, you know, I'm looking at more output-based, and it seems like some of these programs, I think you mentioned that they're, you know, they've been around for several years, and we're we're continuing. You know, have we been successful in those programs? You know, that's the kind of stuff.
And I can answer that. I can answer that for you.
Assure me that we've had success here, and that's worth continuing, and what has been that success, and that sort of thing. So that's what I'm going to be looking for. I mean, because what you're saying is we're making a $66 million decision.
Well, and keep in mind that what you've got there, yes, it is a total of $66 million, but what you've got there, too, is the full 2 years of work.
Right. That's right.
It's everything.
That's right.
It's a cumulative amount
but
of
it's
all
still
of the different.
$66 million. Yeah.
But
Correct.
in this effort right here that you're looking at, in the second category of the 2009 money, some of these things are going to agency ops, some are staying here with you because they're under 100,000. But you're also looking at what's down here all the way across that's either small or is going to agency ops. That's right.
So agency ops will look at the $66 million.
All that work that's over 100, well, a lot of the work is over 100,000. I mean, that's why there's quite a few number of items on the agency ops.
We really, you know, we have this problem because in the current configuration of the committees, if the committee chairmen aren't there, or if someone who sits on the committee doesn't know, then you've got to go through this process of more or less vetting and proving out the worthiness of these programs again.
Yeah.
And it really ought to be done, it seems to me, initially. I mean, why should we be in the blind about moving something over to agency ops? And this is what happened, you know, before.
But that's kind of what I'm looking for, like on Teacher Quality Grants Program, $11.9 million. You know, give me information to show me that we're going in the right direction there, that the money.
And we have it. And we can do. I can provide that for you.
Okay.
And then that you picked
Is
out
there a
sort of a
best
distinctive
practices,
program.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah, that
we
one's-
refer to.
That's a federal program with very specific
Right, but you
guidelines.
see
So
where I'm
yeah.
getting at. I mean, okay.
But I still have evaluation results for it.
Right.
Even though it's federally mandated and the agency is receiving the money,
Right.
we still have evaluation.
Great. thank you.
Any other questions? Does that answer your question?
Yes, I mean, like I say, I think you have the information. I think we're just going to need to look at different elements of that information for ops, or I know at least I will.
And that's not a problem.
Okay.
We can do it for any of the programs that we're taking forward, so you can see that.
Madam Chair, I might be able to provide some clarification.
Okay.
On the sheet that you're looking at, the 66 million, there are two programs in there that the teacher quality will be separated out. You know, that's a whole separate process. So the approval of those are not really included in here. And the marketing campaign was previously approved. So what you see here, those two particular programs are not actually, the concepts for those programs are being approved by this committee, but they're not going to agency ops at this point. Those two.
Okay, so we're not looking at 66 million in agency ops?
It's included in here, but they've had prior approval. So we've laid everything out as what we've done. But as terms of evaluation, I still have it. We still have that evaluation to show you. The one that Lynette is making reference to is the College Access Challenge Grant, which you approved. It is not finished with that marketing campaign. We're just getting the RFAs back. So it'll have to come through for approval again once it's awarded. But it's still part of that money.
Needs some sort of asterisk, that's for sure, that it's been approved and it's included within the plan of work, and therefore.
And in the description it has it.
Right.
That's fine.
Right. Well, you know, you're talking about these descriptions, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because some of them say no additional funding is requested. Brenda.
We wrote them up so you'd know exactly what the status was.
It's just when you're looking at the sheet, it's really hard to tell what is and what isn't.
Well, the request was to lay out all of the money and all the things that we have, and to determine what was discretionary, what was federal, and what was mandated. And so we had to list everything.
I think I'm trying to think off the top of my head what might help clarify this. If we're approving the recommendation relating to the activities and the projects that will be considered by agency operations.
That's all.
All of us are going to be at the agency operations meeting because that morning we're having a workshop. So my suggestion is that we approve this and that staff makes note of the fact that we're going to be meeting in agency ops, and that some of the questions that I would encourage all of us to submit between now and then, that those questions are explained when we meet on July 29th, if that will help the process.
We can have it for you ahead of time so you have plenty of time to read it and then can get back to me if you need something.
You know, that way you'll know specifically what the questions are that have been asked as far as what project falls under what timeline and what pocket of money under what timeline as well, what needs to go to agency operations and what doesn't. And, you know, I think maybe that will help everybody in the long run so that this doesn't even happen again.
Yeah, I think once we get the format down, we'll be good to go. It's just, I think we're just mixing different pots.
So
together.
And in your official board agenda on the very last page, it does delineate those that are going to agency ops and those that are not. It's got the date right beside the project.
Got it.
And, Madam Chair?
Yes.
And a concern I have when I'm looking at all of this, and I know I asked this question before, and the answer is everything is part of a strategy for closing the gaps. But we can say that, but we, in terms of making some sort of discernment as to whether the discretionary items are best used in the next 5 years in the way that they're put here. This is still an overarching question that I don't feel is answered for me. But I'm not on agency ops, so if you get through here, you don't have to worry about that.
Well, no, but that's what I was talking about before and why I want to make clear what I would be looking for in ops. I mean, we have to tie it together. What do we, I mean, sometimes you can't anticipate an end result, but you have to have something in mind, some sort of information that says to you, this is the right direction, this is the best opportunity cost.
Yes.
I think for me, that's what's missing.
And we can do that. The projects that are here that we are continuing is based on the fact that we have seen promise and success in that money and in the efforts that they are attempting to do to close the gap, to get students college ready, to educate a population out there in terms of the college readiness standards, and there was still alignment work that had to be done in this whole effort. So, but we can address your concerns. That is not a problem.
And I don't doubt that. I don't doubt any of the expert input at all. It's just we need the information here to show it to us.
Okay, so I don't think we need to put any of this in the motion, but I think that the staff understands the questions.
We do.
So if the motion is as originally made, let's take a vote. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Agenda item.
Quickly as we responded to Dr. Phillips, we will respond to the second one.
Thank you. Agenda item 10, I'm going to ask that we had this sent out to us in advance, and this is what always happens. It's so important, and we always save it till last, except for I think a couple times ago we did put it first. If I could ask that this be moved up to the front of our agenda at the board meeting so that we can go through it, and all board members, if you could notify all board members to look at it, and as I believe Natalia had asked everybody to look at it last time. And if it's okay with everyone, we'll just move on to the next one in the interest of time. Is that all right with everybody?
I also wanted to tell you that we gave you this morning for your information. I know Dr. Phillips has raised questions along the way in terms of the end of course. I provided you with a report that was given to us at the state P16 meeting last week that lays out by TEA all of the end of course, the stuff related to House Bill 3 and the assessment initiative, and at the back there's a timeline chart so that you can see how they're moving forth. So that is for your information.
Great. Okay, are there any questions? Okay, well, moving to agenda item 11, consideration of adopting the staff recommendation to the board relating to the report on financial aid for college students in Texas, fiscal year 2008. That's House Bill 1, General Appropriations Act, Rider 13, pages 3 through 49, 80th Texas Legislature. Lois Hollis, Senior Assistant to the Deputy Commissioner for Business and Finance, Chief Operating Officer, will present this item. Please,
okay.
Lois.
Good morning or afternoon.
Or evening.
You've got no, hopefully not. In your packet, you've got a draft of the report, and it is marked draft because it's still going through edits. But I think right now the only thing, the content isn't changing, but some of the wording may. And what I'm going to do is present to you something a little differently than we've done before. I'm taking some of the data that's in the report and pairing it with tuition and fee data because tuition re-regulation was such a hot topic this time. So we're going to look at the data a little differently. Okay. And we're going to look at it too. There it is. Okay. Thank you. Okay. We're going to look at it in terms of three types of aid: grant aid, which are grants, scholarships, and fellowships. In other words, money that doesn't have to be repaid. We're going to look at work study, which is subsidized employment opportunities, where employment is subsidized by either the federal government, the state government, or the institution, and then loans, which is money that has to be repaid. In 2008, over 623,000 students received over $584 billion in financial aid. That represents about 51% of all students enrolled in higher education. Okay, there are two things that we have been collecting. One, we just started collecting this year, which is we've looked at students who applied for financial aid but didn't receive it because we wanted to see what those numbers look like. And also, we've been collecting merit aid for people who have completed the FAFSA. And what we found when we looked at the students who applied for aid but didn't receive it, we found that the thing that you would expect most would be their incomes were too high. Their expected family contribution was too high. But also we found they didn't enroll in enough hours to be eligible for financial aid. They may have turned in their applications late and there wasn't any aid available to them other than loans, and they turned down the loans. or they may have been required to provide documentation about their income and they didn't follow through. But we've got that data, and it's in the new report, and it's just something interesting that we wanted to look at and make sure that, you know, students who are eligible for money get money. Okay, here's where the departure comes. Normally, what we do is we compare all state aid with federal aid, and we show you what the state trends are and what the federal trends are. What we've done is we've taken all the undergraduate students and we've broken them down by public 2-year and public 4-year and looked at the kind of aid that those students are receiving. First, we're going to look at the public 4-year institutions. 41% of the aid at public 4-year institutions was in the form of grants, 58% was in the form of loans, and 1% was in the form of work study. When you look at who provides the aid, 71% of the aid provided to these students came from the federal government, 9% was state, 14% was institution, and 6% is other, which is aid that the student comes to the institution with. Might be a Kiwanis scholarship, something like that. Something worth noting is that 71% of funds that is federal aid, almost 80% of that is the federal student loan program. So most of that federal aid is from the federal student loan program. Okay, you've seen this slide before, but not in terms of just undergraduate students attending a public 4-year institution. And what this is, the green bars show the amount of grant aid or the percentage of students receiving grant aid. The red bar shows the percentage of students receiving loans. And one thing to note is these numbers are duplicative. That, in other words, you can't add the red to the green because you get way over 100%. And what this shows is that even at the lowest incomes, the majority of students are still having to borrow money. Overall, borrowing is about 71% of all students have to borrow. That's a lot. We took this and then we looked at what the average debt for a student at a public 4-year institution is. There's some national data on that. The average debt that a student graduates with is just over $18,000. The national average is about $18,400, so we're a little under, but not by much. Also, if you look at this chart, the students in the first 4 income groups make up 57% of the students receiving financial aid. So those are the first 2 income quintiles that we talked about when we talked about the feasibility study. So most of the students are in those 2 income quintiles. Okay. This is a little different. What we wanted to do was compare the cost of attendance with grants and scholarships. The purple bar, the solid purple, is the amount of tuition and fees, and then the, whatever you call it, variegated purple is other educational costs, book supplies, personal expenses, room and board. And what we found is that 58% of the total cost is covered by grants and loans combined. If you just look at grant aid, in 2004, 78%, grant aid covered 78% of tuition and fees. Today, or in 2008, grant aid covers 69%, so we're losing ground with that. And I went back and I looked at closing the gaps again, and there's the strategy, affordability strategy, that says our goal is to make sure that every student with financial need has their tuition, fees, and books paid for. So this tells you where we are, and we're not even to tuition and fees yet. Okay. Next, we look at the public 2-year, students attending public 2-year institutions, and this may look a little strange. 65% of the aid recipients receive grants, 33% receive loans, and 2% is work study. And the reason you see this is that community colleges really try to encourage their students not to borrow. Community colleges are held, well, every institution is held accountable if a student defaults on a federal loan. And if that default rate goes above, I think it's 25%, that institution can be kicked out of the title of the federal programs, which means no more Pell money. So two-year colleges are very careful about giving students loans. While they have more grant aid, their grant, they have much fewer dollars, and the average grant amount is much lower. Okay, for them also, for those students, 86% of the aid received is federal, 4% is state, 6% is institutional, and 4% is other. Okay, when you look at their grants versus loans, you see the same sort of trend. Oh, and what I forgot to tell you one other thing, and I'll tell you on this. Because they emphasize grants more than loans, and they de-emphasize loans, what you see is, again, you've got more students with grant aid in the lower incomes, and then as you go up to the higher incomes, you've got more loan aid. The variegated part of the bar chart up there, and the same goes for the public four-year chart, that is merit aid. And this is the first time we've really been able to put that on there. So for these students, it goes from 4% to 10% of the students receiving some sort of merit aid. And as you would expect, more merit aid, you increase the merit aid, the higher you go up the income scale. Okay, the next chart just shows you the financial aid programs, a percent of the funds going to students in different income categories. And we've got Texas Grant, TEG, TEOG, and Beyond Time. 80% of the Texas Grant recipients are from families with incomes under $40,000. For TEG, that amount is 60%, but for TEOG, it's 96%. When you look at Beyond Time, now granted Beyond Time hasn't been funded except for continuing students, but you kind of flip-flop. 21% of the students are from income groups in the two lowest income quintiles.
Which kind of means, and I know it's water under the bridge, but it kind of means that had we put merit with need, we still would have been serving the neediest students.
Yes.
I mean, that proves it.
Right. Well, Beyond Time is not necessarily need-based.
Right, but I mean for the others.
For the others, yeah. It does. And speaking of that, the legislature made significant gains in the amount of money we've got for financial aid. Financial aid, though, in Texas, state financial aid is tied to tuition and fees. So as tuition and fees rise, that increase in aid doesn't go as far. Yeah, exactly. You still have that gap. So with the new money we have in financial aid, especially in Texas Grant, we've got $186 million for the biennium. It's a 44% funding increase. We think we'll be able to serve just over almost 52% of the eligible students, which is great, but we haven't moved the needle that much. To continue making progress and closing the gaps, we still have to get more money into financial aid programs. And, we're making progress on the participation goal, but like you all tried to do this time, we need to start making progress on the success goal. And so our financial aid policies need to reflect that. Glad to answer any questions.
Lois, are you required to have this report done by a certain date?
Yes, we're required to have it to the legislature by August 31st.
Okay. I would just like to see us include, perhaps in this Closing the Gaps plan for the last 5 years, some financial aid goals reflect pretty much what you just said.
Okay.
But I don't want to hold up this report for it. But it sure would be nice if we started, putting the putting some words to this in a report form that aren't so easily politicized, like data-driven decision making to increase underrepresented persistence. How do you like that?
Can you say that twice, please?
But you get what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And
In other
have
words,
that.
confuse them with words.
But show them, here's the data.
Right.
It proves what we're saying. Now we
Yes.
need you to
Exactly.
put the money there.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other thing is
And just, fully funding, and if not fully funding, at least to meet the national average.
Right.
A few little things that in a, not a very political way, point out we need to do a little better.
Right. We can do that.
I was going to say, I wish, too, that we would look at other states that have a better financial aid package, like we talked about the Hope Scholarship in Georgia, and I believe that they have now put merit with it. Is that
Actually,
correct?
Hope has always been merit. It
that's right.
hasn't
You have to
been
have a
need.
B average or something like that.
Yeah.
So it seems like maybe we could make a case by looking nationally at what other states are doing.
Right now, we typically look at California.
Right.
And we don't want to look at them right now because the legislature, they're reneging on some of their grants. It's a scary time to look at other states right now just because of the lack of money.
Right.
But we can look at their practices and what they've done.
Yeah. Ms. Pavich?
I think part of our case, too, as we continue to ask for more money, for more funding for financial aid, certainly that's going to help close the gaps in terms of participation. But to me, this third bullet point is critical. We need to make sure that our financial aid policies help close the gaps in success, too. Success. Is part of the report also a report on the success side, or?
No, it's really to report the data that's out there.
Do we have that information? I know we have it somewhere.
Dan Weaver has run that information. We've got, we used it a lot this session, and you all used it a lot this session to
and
make
I'm sure
the case.
We've seen it, but refresh my memory and give me another copy, if you would. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the case that we made for the merit and that study that was done, and it just...
But we have an updated report, I'm assuming, since then. Yeah, okay.
And I think this is an opportunity when we have reports on the financial aid, not just to have numbers, but to hone our message down to one that can be heard. We have to get it heard, and if we have to say it differently, then we just have to. But when you present a report that proves something, and then they assign you to go do a report, we don't need to act out. We can just respond with a different message.
That's good. Any other comments?
I have one, actually.
Sure.
I think the success comment is going to be really important because with so many students, even the really high-need students needing to take out loans, as we lose people, as there is no retention with those students, they still have these loans to pay back. And it's going to negatively affect the influence that they have on their own children going to school.
That's exactly right.
Because they have loans that they have no degree to pay for.
Exactly.
So I think that'll be a very important component.
Excellent point.
It's connected to the end of course funding as well. These are related efforts, and we need to make a better point of showing that, I think.
Good point. Any other questions? May I have a motion to adopt the staff recommendation relating to the report on financial aid for college students in Texas, fiscal year 2008, House Bill 1, General Appropriations Act, Rider 13, page 3 through 49, 80th Texas Legislature?
So moved.
Second. Okay, moved by Dr. Phillips, second by Ms. Mendoza. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Agenda items 12, 13, 14 are on the consent calendar. Agenda item 15 is a discussion of proposed rule changes resulting from the 81st Texas legislative session to be voted on at the July board meeting. Dr. Laredo, is this something that we need to go over now, or since there's no action required?
No, you don't need to at this time. They've been posted, but the posting period is not over. And so until that time, you really cannot do anything until it's back on the agenda. But we wanted you to make you aware that these rules are being developed based on the legislature, the closing of the legislature.
Okay. Are there any questions? This is not an action item. Okay. That concludes the Participation and Success Committee agenda for June 22nd, 2009. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Hinton. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Mendoza. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting is adjourned, and I believe we're going to take a break.